In at 5, the Lady in Red in Lower Bay Station. Now, a Lady in Red is a popular theme in many legends and ghost stories, with few popping up across America and Canada. However, this one comes from Toronto, specifically below Bay Station, where another subway station lies, Lower Bay Station. The Toronto Transit Commission reportedly opened the station in 1966 while experimenting with routes, but soon realized that if the route was to become delayed, it would slow down the entire subway system. Therefore, it was shut down just 6 months later. The city later went on to build Bay Station on top of it, connecting the two platforms with a red door that is only accessible to employees. Workers and occasional movie productions still use the old station, however, and it is here that folks have claimed to have seen the Lady in Red wandering the abandoned tracks. People have reported that she has no legs and had only black holes for eyes. Her apparition only lingers for 30 seconds before disappearing. Some believe it to be a woman that was pushed onto the tracks, but no records of any such incident exist. Others think it's more likely she was a former resident of Potter's Field, a cemetery for social outcasts and the poor, which the city attempted to relocate in 1855 to build the station. Coming in at 4, the legend of Gibraltar Point Lighthouse. The Gibraltar Point Lighthouse is located on the Toronto Islands in Toronto. Beginning in 1808, it is the oldest existing lighthouse on the Great Lakes and one of Toronto's oldest buildings. Now, due to its age, this lighthouse is of course shrouded in mystery, specifically regarding its first keeper, J.P. Radamula. According to the legend, soldiers from Fort York visited J.P. on the evening of January 2nd, 1815 in search of his bootlegged beer, but they had too much to drink and a dispute broke out, culminating in the keeper's murder. The inebriated soldiers tried to conceal their crime by chopping apart the corpse and hiding the remains. In 1893, then keeper George Dernan searched for the corpse and found part of a jawbone and coffin fragments near the lighthouse, though it was never definitively proven that they were linked to JP. As one of the oldest legends in Toronto, the truth behind the lighthouse keeper's death and disappearance remains a mystery even to this day, and the legend certainly lives on. Coming in at 3, Summit Elementary School. In Amarillo, Texas, there's a haunting legend surrounding a closed and abandoned school that everyone avoids. The Summit Elementary School is one of the most haunted locations in all of Texas, and its dark history makes it a hub for ghosts and spirits alike. The school was open up until 1972 and is haunted for numerous reasons, including a janitor who killed students and stuck them in the boiler, racially motivated murders that took place in the school, and murdered prostitutes hidden in the walls. These are just a few of the legends surrounding the terrifying building. Worse still, legend has it that if you're brave enough to visit the abandoned school at night, your car may do strange things. Swings will move by themselves and you might even hear voices coming from the walls. Honestly, this school is beginning to sound like the one from Marianne, which is a French horror series you all need to watch immediately. Do it. The Queen demands it. Coming in at 2, the Candy Lady. Now, this very well might be one of the scariest urban legends I've ever read and may result in a lot of you sleeping with the light on tonight. Sorry in advance. This theory goes, I quote, "The Candy Lady allegedly lures children to their doom by leaving enticing goodies on their windowsills just before bedtime. Her plan is for the kids to wait for mum and dad to fall asleep before indulging in the sweet treats so as not to get in trouble. Afterwards, she'll grab them and feast on their sugar-laden blood until there isn't any left. Children began to go missing, yet no leads were ever found that would suggest they were kidnapped or ran away. As some of the remaining children got older, they confessed to eating candy left on their windowsills with a note from the Candy Lady, so parents started to wonder if the other children perhaps had been poisoned. The worry was soon put to rest when someone actually turned up dead. Not a child though, but a sheriff's deputy who had been investigating the disappearances. His eyes had been stabbed out with a fork, and his pockets stuffed with candy. A farmer also found a child-sized set of teeth inside a candy wrapper one morning while tending to his fields. Very creepy. The legend still remains in Texas, and whenever children go missing, people are very quick to blame the Candy Lady. And finally, coming in at number 1, Black-Eyed Children. Black-Eyed Children or Black-Eyed Kids are a contemporary legend of supposed paranormal creatures that resemble children between the ages of 6 and 16 with pale skin and black eyes who are reportedly seen hitchhiking or are encountered on doorsteps of residential homes. Now, children are creepy already. They say strange things and their innocence allows them to breach the barrier between the living and the dead that we jaded adults just don't possess. However, the Black-Eyed Children legend is one for the history books, and is downright terrifying. In the late 90s, a journalist named Brian Bethel was working in his town of Abilene, Texas, when he encountered something he'll never forget. He was parked outside a movie theater when two children knocked on his window. Brian couldn't quite understand why, but he was completely overcome with fear at the sight of them. He rolled down the window regardless, and the kids asked him for a ride back to their home so that they could get cash for the movie. His fear, however, made him hesitate, but the children were persistent. They then began to say some weird things, like, "We're not armed" or anything. Brian looked back at the kids and noticed how their eyes had turned pitch black. They then began screaming at him that they could only come in the car if he invited them in, so he quickly drove away. He spread the word about the black-eyed children and was surprised when a lot of other people came forward reporting similar experiences. In at number 5 we have Space Mountain. There are a surprising amount of urban legends surrounding this ride at Disney World, which is odd. It is just a ride after all, right? Nothing strange about it. According to legend, one rider was decapitated while on Space Mountain because he supposedly stood up while riding. What an idiot. Now, this is only a little bit true. There was a decapitation, but it was on a test dummy, not a real person. No person has ever been killed while riding Space Mountain. However, there is another dark legend that surrounds this ride. According to legend, on Space Mountain you can find Mr. One-Way. Some accounts describe Mr. One-Way as a red-haired man with a red face, with stories stating that he hangs out in the line for Space Mountain. But this differs depending on who you ask. According to video footage, Mr. One-Way will sometimes get onto the ride with other passengers, grabbing an available seat. However, it is said that he disappears right before you reach the final tunnel at the end of the ride. On top of that, there is supposedly a second ghost called Disco Debbie, who is also said to haunt Space Mountain, and according to some riders, she glows in the dark. Very freaky indeed. Coming in at number 4 we have Magnolia Creek Lake. Magnolia was once a thriving riverport town in southern Wakulla County, Florida, which was established all the way back in the 1820s and is now classified as an extinct city by the State Library and Archives of Florida. All that remains of the city is a cemetery, with the last known burial being back in 1859. Magnolia Creek Lane is a narrow road fit for one car at a time south of Montverde on the west side of Lake Apopka. According to legend, the road and surrounding lake is haunted by around 200 passengers who were killed in a train wreck. However, many have attempted to find evidence of this, but none has ever been found, yet the legend continues. Now, while the road appears to be built on an old train track, the only documented railroad ran slightly north of the location. Now, this road is supposedly where all kinds of horrible things happened back in the 1890s, and according to some locals, at the creek that runs to Lake Apopka, you can hear the loud screams in the woods. However, when you get closer they move farther away. The screams are said to be that of the train crew that died. However, skeptics believe this is actually sound that is being reflected from another place. According to a local, Michelle, she said, I quote, "My cousin went to Montverde Academy and heard about this road that runs off 455 that used to be a railroad bed. And they say that if you go down there at night you can hear ghostly sounds and see eerie shadows of people walking on the road. I don't know for sure about this because I never went there, so it is just what I heard." Coming in at number 3, I-4 Dead Zone. Interstate 4 is a highway in Florida that spans 132 miles, with it running from Tampa all the way to Daytona Beach. Now, the interstate is frequented daily by folks heading to work and those on their way to Disney World. Now, while it is a popular highway, it is also another nickname for it, the Dead Zone, an area where folks need to be particularly careful. This area of the highway has been the location of many accidents, electronic malfunctions, as well as supposed ghost sightings. So why exactly is this spot so dangerous and filled with so much paranormal activity? Well, this is because this quarter mile of highway was built over a gravesite, and as we know from movies, a disturbed gravesite means bad news bears. It means you're in for a nasty surprise. It means you're gonna die. Don't believe it? Well, oddly enough, on the very first day the new interstate was opened, a tractor trailer carrying frozen goods lost control and crashed directly above the disturbed graves of people who had died from yellow fever. It is believed that around 1,500 to 2,000 accidents have occurred on the highway since 1963, which is a lot. And worse still, many of those accidents result resulted in death, and between a 24-month period, there were around 44 car accidents, resulting in approximately 65 people being injured. Some locals fear this area of the highway so much that they actually take a much longer route around it. On top of all of this, back in the 1950s, a young boy was said to have disturbed the graves, and the following night he was killed by a drunk driver. And to add insult to injury, the driver was never caught.
Number 3. The Gander, Newfoundland encounter. Our next story comes to us from Gander, Newfoundland, and it happened on February 10, 1951. A U.S. Naval Reserve lieutenant and pilot Graham Bethune was occupying the captain's seat of a plane flying near Newfoundland, Canada, when he spotted something unusual, massive, and rapidly approaching towards the plane. It resembled a disc. The co-pilot made a report of what he saw, and this is what he wrote. Take a listen. I observed a glow of light below the horizon about 1,000 to 1,500 feet above the water. The pilot and I observed its course and motion for about 4 or 5 minutes before calling it to the attention of the other crew members. Suddenly, the object changed direction at an incredible speed and began to pulsate, changing its colors as well. Then, it somehow reversed its course and tripled its speed until at last it disappeared over the horizon. The report would go on to say that whatever this object was, it came within 5 miles of the aircraft, which was proven later by radar evidence. Now, when the plane had landed, the entire crew was detained by intelligence officers and interrogated. At their destination, pilot and passengers were questioned again by naval intelligence and required to sign full disclosure documents. Now, take this next part with a grain of salt. Okay? Because I only found one source on this. But apparently a CIA scientist confidentially interviewed the pilot, and during their interrogation, he showed him a photo of a disc-like object that looked extremely similar to the one they had seen flying over the Atlantic. However, during the interviews, no Navy, Air Force, or CIA men would ever answer any questions related to extraterrestrials. No one would say the word alien, no one was saying UFO, nothing like that. They were trying very hard to downplay that. So what was it then? Because it sounds incredibly suspicious that the interviewers had a photo of something that looked similar to it and weren't saying the word alien at all. Number 2. November 1986 Japanese Airlines flight. Our next one comes to us from a pair of Japanese pilots. In November 1986, Japanese Airlines Flight 1628 was heading over Alaska. Captain Kenju Terauchi and a crew of 2 others were on a flight making routine cargo deliveries to France. Captain Terauchi saw something that caught his attention when he saw blinding lights flashing off at the left and the right of the plane. Now, initially he didn't think too much of it. He thought, hey, maybe these are just US fighter jets zipping around. As his plane furthered forward, he realized that the object was flying ahead of him was of the unidentified variety, a UFO, if you will. Terauchi said that it looked like 2 spaceships had stopped in front of their faces, shooting off lights. The inside cockpit shined brightly, and I felt warm in the face, he wrote. That almost sounds kind of pleasant, to be honest. Captain Terauchi described the objects as being cuboid-shaped spaceships with a jet propulsion system that had horizontal lines of circular exhausts clustered around a dark center. The captain had also reported that when the plane had flown by this object, ground communications were cut out and all radar was blocked. Well, that's kind of odd, isn't it? Pretty interesting. Well, if you thought that was weird, the FAA would agree with it. That's the Federal Aviation Administration, who investigated the report very closely, interrogating Terauchi for everything they could out of the incident. Now, during this questioning, his co-pilot and his flight engineer, they said that they thought the object they saw was just strange lights, but they did agree that they really couldn't easily explain what it was they saw. In the end, the FAA ruled that what it was light refraction through ice crystals suspended in clouds. A bunch of science words. Sure. Number 1. Lieutenant Gorman. Our number 1 spot on this list is a humdinger of a tale. Now, most of us can only hope to maybe someday see a UFO in our lives, but I mean, maybe if you were like me and you watched Star Wars way too many times and you still ask the hairdressers to get your hair cut like Luke Skywalker, not like anybody I know, maybe you dream of flying an X-Wing through the stars, dodging lasers, getting into a cool alien dogfight. It's a shame none of us can claim we've done that, except, you know, George Gorman of the North Dakota National Guard. I don't think anyone would expect there to be anything exciting happening in North Dakota, but one of the best UFO encounters in American history did. Let's take a little listen and learn about it. It was 1948, a year after the New Mexico Roswell incident, while people were still hyper-focused on little gray men and flying saucers. Lieutenant Gorman was flying a fighter jet solo around the skies above Fargo when he saw what he thought was an aircraft around 500 feet below him. He radioed his tower, but the operator told him that there weren't any other planes to be around and that it was a suspicious vehicle. So Gorman told the tower back he was going to investigate the situation and flew in with than 1,000 yards to try and positively ID the subject. Gorman said, "It looked to be about 6 to 8 inches, clear white and completely round without fuzz at the edges, and it was blinking on and off. As I approached, the light suddenly became steady and pulled into a sharp left bank. I thought it was making a pass at the tower." Gorman then said he thought the light charged at him. He didn't want to be the first pilot to crash into a UFO, so he readied himself to avoid it, but found the object suddenly shot straight upwards in the air, directly above him, and then disappearing into the clouds. Gorman tried his best to pull up to follow along, but his plane went into a stall while he was trailing it, and the entity had vanished. Back at the air tower, 2 traffic controllers reported they also saw a light flying above the airstrip they couldn't explain, and weren't present on any flight logs. Gorman was questioned about what he saw, and he said he was convinced that it wasn't just a light, that it moved too naturally, that it moved like it was reacting to his movements, as if it was playing a game with him. He said there was thought and precision behind all its maneuvers. We should ask it what it thought about all of that if Gorman was moving too naturally, reacting to all of that.
5. Arlington Screaming Bridge. Now this Texas legend will quite honestly make your hair stand on end. Legend has it that one full night more than 50 years ago, several teens were carpooling home after their high school football game. Still riled up over the victory, driving responsibly definitely wasn't of utmost importance to the young teens. The bridge running through Arlington's River Legacy Park was just wide enough for one car at a time. You can probably guess where this is going. The teens hooting and hollering drowned out all the noise, like that of a vehicle that had no working headlights. The cars collided head-on before erupting in a fiery explosion and plunging into the waters below. Nobody survived. The bridge is now closed to vehicular traffic, with the site only accessed on foot. However, it now has a new name gifted to it by locals: Screaming Bridge, a name which was coined after the first brave souls went exploring along the bridge and experienced events that can only be explained by the supernatural. Legend has it, if you stand on the bridge and gaze into the river below, you'll see a tombstone for each of the deceased with their names, date of birth, and death. Visit at midnight on the anniversary and you'll hear 2 cars screeching towards each other before colliding. Coming in at 4, the nurse at Bexar County Hospital. If you ever find yourself in Texas, whatever you do not find yourself at the dilapidated Bexar County Hospital, because it is supposedly housing the spirit based on an American serial killer called Janine Jones. Now, the real-life killer is responsible for the deaths of up to 60 infants and children in her care as a licensed vocational nurse during the 1970s and 1980s. In 1994, she was convicted of murder and was sentenced to 99 years in prison with triple credit. Now, the legend of the nurse at Bexar County Hospital has similar treading, with legend stating that a murderous spirit used to wander the halls killing patients in order of their room number, first 201, then 202, 203, 204. It began in one ward where patients all began asking about one particular nurse. However, when the staff checked the security camera, they found the patients speaking to seemingly no one. They saw the curtains close on their own, tracheotomy tubes get pulled out by an unseen force, but then, very quickly, the patients began dying in their room number order. Like I said, many Bexar County locals believe the legend to be based off of Janine Jones, but what do you guys think? Coming in at number 2, we have the Devil's Chair, also known as the Haunted Chair. This is an urban legend hailing from folklore that is attached to a class of funerary or memorial sculpture common throughout the United States during the 19th century. Now, these chairs were known as the mourning chairs for visitors to cemeteries to sit on when visiting loved ones. However, since then, cemeteries have provided benches for similar purposes. Once the original purpose of these chairs fell out of fashion, superstition quickly developed in association with sitting in the chair. For example, some young people dare one another to visit the site, most often after dark or at midnight, or in some cases on Halloween. Stories state that if you sit in the chair at these specific times, something awful will happen, with people fearing that they will be punished. In Florida specifically, the Devil's Chair is located in Cassadaga, Florida, and is a graveside bench in the cemetery that borders Cassadaga as well as Lake Helen. According to legend, an unopened can of beer left on the chair will be empty by morning. Now, in some stories, the can has already been opened, and in others the liquid is simply gone through the unopened top. On top of that, it is said that the devil will sometimes appear to anyone bold enough to sit in the chair itself. So if you do decide to visit the chair at night and take a seat expecting to meet the devil, just be sure to have a beer in hand ready for him, because it is said that he will be expecting one. As am I, all the time. I would like a beer. Maybe that's why I'm evil. I'm the devil. And finally, coming in at number 1, Legend of the Skunk Ape. Also known as the Swamp Cabbage Man, Swamp Ape, Stink Ape, Florida Bigfoot, and Louisiana Bigfoot, this is a creature that is said to inhabit Florida and is named for its appearance and for its unpleasant odor that is said to accompany it. The ape has supposedly been a part of Florida folklore since the settler period, which is absolutely insane. One of the first reports of the skunk ape in Florida came from the year 1818, when a report spoke of a man-sized monkey or ape raiding stores and stalking fishermen. This became particularly common in the 60s and 70s, with one sighting occurring in 1974 which spoke of a large foul-smelling hairy ape-like creature which was said to run upright on 2 legs in the neighborhood of Dade County, Florida. However, some people were skeptical, including investigator Joe Nickel, who stated that these reports may represent a black bear and that the sightings may in fact be hoaxes or misidentification of wildlife. In terms of appearance, the creature is said to resemble the Sasquatch of the Pacific Northwest. However, the skunk ape is said to be shorter in comparison. It has long patches of fur on the shoulders and arm and is often described as a mottled rusty red color as opposed to the Sasquatch's brown and black coat.
The Navy pilots. Since the release of the UAP documents, the new nomenclature, UFO fever has been in the air more than ever since Roswell. We've got open confirmation that the US government, the Pentagon, is researching actively the possibility of alien craft outright. That's the craziest thing that's ever happened in my life. In September 2019, Navy spokesperson Joe Gradisher confirmed that 3 recently released videos by the military contain evidence of unidentified aerial phenomenon. Like, that's it. This is the Navy, the government pointing to a video and going, yeah, that's an unidentified flying object that we don't know about. They're not saying it's a weather balloon. They're not saying it's stars. They're not outright saying it's an alien, but they're certainly implying it. The Navy agreed that they would confirm the sightings this time because pilots encounter bizarre sightings all the time, but are usually too concerned to report the sightings because of the stigma attached to previous theories about what may or may not be in those videos. Put gently, it means that the Navy felt like they had to comment on this thing so that pilots would feel comfortable admitting that maybe they're seeing UFOs without feeling like a tinfoil hat wearing conspiracist. The videos in question include reports from the STARS Academy of Arts and Sciences, released from 2017 to 2018. They feature long, oblong-shaped objects captured with infrared that appear in the Earth's atmosphere before rapidly disappearing from view. Now, really interestingly here is these aren't the only pill-shaped cylindrical UFOs that have been spotted recently. There were 2 videos from 2015 that came out, and before that, there was a Navy case involving these in 2004, and even on the rest of this list, you'll see a cylindrical cigar-shaped UFO in a sighting from the 40s. So this sort of thing does happen a lot. Now, the purpose of the Navy investigating all this stuff, it's more focused on safety hazard and threats of national security, but hey, at the same time, they may not be willing to talk about it so brazenly, but they definitely are checking just a little bit to make sure they are aliens. But they definitely know more than they're letting on. This footage released only makes up a tiny fraction of what the US Navy and other service branches encounter. One pilot, Lieutenant Graves, claims that in his 10 years flying for the Navy, he thinks he's probably encountered, I don't know, thousands of UFOs in his time. Those are his words. Now, who is to say how many of those might just actually be unidentified flying objects, birds, scouts, drones, whatever, but who's to say how many of them really were alien craft from outside the planet? And my friends, if you're looking to educate yourself on the matter of extraterrestrials, UAPs, UFOs, well, you've got to know by now Top 5 Scary is the place to be. I see the viewer stats in the videos. You goblins love when we talk about aliens. Well, if you want to keep loving them, click on through. We've got more unexplained sightings in the sky than the CIA. And if you want them delivered hot and fresh, you can subscribe and get them before anybody else. Number 4. Childs Whitted Case. The Childs Whitted encounter is one of the most recognized UFO encounters in American history for how surprisingly credible it seems. It happened shortly after the Roswell incident, when UFO fever was hot on everybody's minds in the States, and it was showing. The sighting occurred in the morning hours of one July 24th, 1948. The 2 pilots, one Clarence Childs and John Whitted, were flying approximately 5,000 feet above Montgomery, Alabama on a clear, normal night. Flight was going well, nothing too exciting, but at around 2:45 in the morning, Childs saw something peculiar. He noticed a dull red glowing light above and ahead of the aircraft, and it wasn't even remotely near Christmas, so it wasn't Rudolph leading the sleigh. He told Whitted that it must be a new type of army jet that was flying in front of them that neither of them had ever seen. They wanted to get a better look at it, and in a matter of seconds, well, they would, when the object flew past the right side of their plane and pulled up with a tremendous burst of flame protruding from its rear, and it zoomed upwards and onwards into the clouds. The 2 pilots described the object looking like a flying paying cigar with a cylindrical chassis and 2 decks and windows. Besides the 2 pilots, one passenger on the flight, one C.L. McKelvey, insisted that during his flight he saw a bright streak of red flashing lights by one of his windows. Now, Childs and Whitted were obviously pretty darn confused by whatever it was they'd saw. Didn't look like no plane they'd seen before, and the way it moved seemed technologically more advanced than anything the US Army was putting out in the late 40s. Now, the US Army proper would challenge this account, and their scientists insisted. They investigated the report and said that it was probably just a meteor the pilots and passengers had seen, which almost sounds like it might make sense until you stop and think about it for a second, because what meteor has windows and a glowing red light coming from it and propels itself forward and rapidly goes upward? Most meteors I've ever heard of go downwards. And Childs and Whitted both disagreed with this as well, saying they got a good long look at it and it wasn't a meteor. Whatever it truly was, though, might be lost to history, tragically.
Coming in at 3, UFO encounter in Manitoba. All the way back in 1967, Stefan McCallick ventured into the woods around Falcon Lake near Winnipeg, Manitoba, in search of silver and quartz, when he was startled by a gaggle of geese that erupted into a clattering of honks. According to his own report, he then noticed 2 cigar-shaped crafts hovering in the air before one flew away. However, the other one landed. Stefan stated that he waited half an hour before approaching. He heard mechanical noises, smelled sulfur, and felt warm air as he gradually got closer. As he did, he noticed an open door panel, and coming from within were colored lights and muffled voices that sounded like humming. Then, out of nowhere, the door panel closed, and a blast of gas from the craft knocked Stefan back and off his feet, with his clothes being set ablaze. He managed to take them off and ran into town when he began to feel extremely sick. Doctors quickly discovered that his sickness was caused by radiation, and officials who checked the site also discovered radioactive soil samples and metal melted into the rocks. Now, since then, the son of Stefan has written a book about the ongoing mystery. Stan McCallick, the son of Stefan, has previously stated that he very clearly remembers the day his dad came home sick and injured after something happened to him in the Falcon Lake woods. I quote, "I recalled seeing him in bed. He didn't look good at all. He looked pale, haggard. When I walked into the bedroom, there was a huge stink in the air, like a real horrible aroma of sulfur and burnt motor. It was all around and it was coming out of his pores. It was bad." The book was launched back in 2017 in conjunction with the 50th anniversary of the incident. In at 2, headless ghosts in Old Montreal. The historic neighborhood of Old Montreal in Quebec is known to be one of the most haunted places in all of Canada. The city's oldest road, St. Paul Street, is supposedly a walkway for the paranormal at night, with visitors often reporting sightings of ghostly horse-drawn carriages or an apparition of Marie Joseph Angelique wearing the same white robe she had on when she was executed. Not only that, but Mary Gallagher, former Lady of the Night, is reported to appear on William and Murray Streets every 7 years, looking for her head, which was taken off by her one-time best friend. If this doesn't do it for you, you can also head over to the Old Montreal graveyards, which are known to be abound with ghostly activity, especially in Mount Royal, North America's largest intact cemetery. Visitors have claimed to see apparitions wandering around the plots at night, as well as hear giggling, creaking, and other eerie noises coming from within the cemetery. More interesting still, some of the ghosts that people have reported seeing include several people who perished on the Titanic, and an often seen Algonquin man who looks over the cliff to the city below. And finally, coming in at number 1, the Cave Monster. One of the most haunting legends to come out of Canada comes to us from my city, Toronto, once again, and supposedly took place in August 1978. It was during this time that a 51-year-old man named Ernest went looking for his missing kitten in a Parliament Street tunnel after crawling into an opening near his apartment building. This is where he described seeing a monster that had grey fur, red eyes, and weighing approximately 30 pounds. Now, if you're not from Toronto, we have a sprawling path system, 28 kilometers of climate-controlled underground walkways and shopping. However, what if I told you this wasn't the only underground city we have? Well, as reported by the Toronto Sun in March 1979, about 10 feet into the tunnel that Ernest explored, he spotted a thin, human-like figure some 3 feet tall, with, as previously mentioned, grey fur and slanted orange-red eyes. The creature supposedly hissed hissed at him, stating, get out," before fleeing down a side tunnel. Now, it is possible that Ernest was hallucinating or even lying, although saying that, the way the article was written seems to suggest that Laurie Goldstein, the reporter, believed him. Unfortunately, we'll likely never know what actually happened. When the story broke, the entrance to the tunnel had effectively been blocked off by collapsing concrete. Goldstein no longer remembers where the opening was, making the location virtually impossible to find. However, not long ago, someone online spoke of the underground tunnel that may have brought new light to the mystery. I quote, "There is a small opening to the underground tunnels off Parliament Street in downtown Toronto. The entrance is between two apartment buildings and leads to the tunnels via the sewers. The underground city beneath Toronto has its centre beneath Gerrard Street and Church Street. Above this area, strange magnetic effects have been observed. It is believed that underground equipment utilising powerful magnetic fields are responsible for the bizarre equipment failures that often are the cause of these accidents." Well, now we know the tunnels are real, do you believe the monster is? You decide.
Number 5, we've got the Mogollon Monster. If you've ever taken a drive up the 87, you might have come across a set of very colorful, very large footprints tracked across the highway. While these particular prints were put there by people, they are in homage to the Mogollon Monster, aka Arizona's answer to Bigfoot. This big beastie lives along the Mogollon Rim and has been seen from Prescott all the way to Clifton. Sightings of the monster date back to early as 1903, with plenty of reports of video, tracks, and hair samples appearing since. People claim that the Mogollon Monster is a bipedal humanoid towering over most at 7 feet tall, leaving behind 22-inch footprints. Like most ape-like beasts in the woods, it has crazy strength and some wild eyes. Some claim it's covered in long black hair, others say it's reddish brown. Maybe it changes with the seasons, or maybe there's more than one. The Mogollon Monster is also known for smelling really, really bad. Like dead fish, skunk, BO, peat moss, and snapping turtle musk. I'd hide out in the woods if I smelled like that too. Part of the reason why it's so rarely sighted is that it tends to be active at night. It will hunt and gather all sorts of different foods under cover of darkness and make little nests for itself. If you stumble across one of these pine needle refuges, get the hell out of there. This beefy monster is known to be very territorial and very violent. It reportedly likes to decapitate deer and other wildlife before digging in, and if it can pull the dome off a deer, it can pop your top off like a bottle of Coke. Be careful if you hear any weird noises too, because the Mogollon Monster likes to mimic other wildlife. Birds, coyotes, it is even reported to shriek like a woman in distress. So don't go running off to save the damsel, because you might find yourself face to face with a very hairy hunter. Tie up your supplies if you're camping too, as the monster will rummage through stuff left out.
You know, they were all about the hairy man or the wild man or something like that. And of course I didn't believe them.
This, says Wade, is a small baby Bigfoot trying to hide in the corner from his night vision camera.
Coming in at number 4, we've got El Chupacabra. Ah, the Southwest classic. Such a strange creature, the Chupacabra. Is it an alien? A demon dog? Something else? Also known as the goat sucker, these cryptids love to feed on livestock, attacking in the night. Farmers and other animal owners have often found these creatures totally hollowed out following particularly dark nights. Common features of the Chupacabra attacks are a complete lack of blood and puncture wounds in the neck and hindquarters. The wounds are always super clean, no signs of struggle or messiness. Sometimes there are weird injuries too. Cattles often have their anuses cored out, and somehow, even with these brutal injuries, no blood is found. Do the goat suckers inject some sort of sedative? Do they have magical powers? We may never know. One theory is that they have wings and descend on their prey and drain them before they have time to react. This would also explain the lack of tracks that accompany Chupacabra attacks. Although, if they were so quick and clever, wouldn't they also attack humans? Maybe our blood just doesn't taste as good. Now, this legend didn't start in Arizona, but now it's quite prevalent. El Chupacabra seems to have originated in Puerto Rico and made its way into Latin America, eventually spreading to the southwestern states. Now you'd be hard-pressed to find an Arizonan without some sort of Chupacabra story. Tucson resident Billy Nubian claims that he saw one attacking his goats late one night. He was startled awake by the panic sounds of his goats bleeding. Running outside to investigate, he saw a huge rat-like creature pinning one of his goats. It then turned to face Billy, let out a blood-curdling scream, and ran off into the dark. Sarah A. has a similar story where she encountered a half-man, half-ape creature crouching frog-style in her yard. freaky. Coming in at number 3, we've got the Mazarol. Speaking of non-human entities, let's take a quick trip to the mountains. The Italian Dolomites, to be specific. No relation to the comedian turned movie star recently played by Eddie Murphy. This mountain range sits stoutly in northeastern Italy and is full of legends and secrets. Plenty of cryptids and creatures are said to roam these mysterious mountains, from fairies to wizards and witches to mythical royalty. But the creature that piques my interest the most is the Mazarol. In the valleys of Belluno province, this myth is still well known and widespread. This tiny, playful creature resembles a gnome, so make sure you tag your friends and let them know they've been gnomed. Whew. Now that I've made my requisite meme reference for the day, I can get to the actual details. This tiny, cap-wearing dude dressed in red wanders around the woods. For him to simply wander would be kind of boring though, so of course there's some darkness to this myth. He loves to find folks traveling around dusk and then lead them astray. Anyone who treads on top of his footprints is compelled by forces unknown to follow them all the way back to the no man's cave, after which they will forget everything about themselves. Many a tourist has fallen victim to the Mazarol's mean-spirited trickery. Some legends even say that the Mazarol will abduct the occasional individual and make them his slave. The story goes that the gnome managed to steal a young woman away from her village and put her to work. He was kind during this time and taught her many skills: cheese making, butter churning, and more. He even promised to teach her how to extract wax from whey. However, he was never able to complete this final task, as one day a hunter stumbled upon the missing girl and brought her back home. A remedy made from goat's milk brought her memory back, and the girl, overwhelmed with gratitude, taught the villagers how to make cheese and butter. To this day though, nobody has figured out how to extract wax from whey. Maybe someone will seek out the Mazarol and find out though. Coming in at number 2, we've got the Witches of Montamatana. More mountainous mythical monsters are waiting for you. If you make your way out to Montamatana, you will find world-class hiking and some unexpected extracurriculars. That's right, you can go witch hunting. Years ago, it was said that this mountain was a popular spot for witches to perform rituals and human sacrifices. They practiced their magics upon the crags and cliffs and amassed great fortunes. Reincarnations of these witches are said to return often in search of their material wealth from past lifetimes. The reality of this wealth is often called into question, but that doesn't stop treasure seekers from braving the range. Some of these booty seekers say they've encountered violent witches willing to slit their throats, but have somehow made it out alive. Maybe other proverbial pirates didn't make it out so well. Either way, Montamatana is well known for magic, and you'd probably be best off if you just avoided making the perilous journey at night. Unless you'd like to run into some witches, and in that case, I'll reserve judgment. And finally, at number 1, we've got Poveglia Island. This tiny island about a half-mile from Venice has been shut off from the public for years. Some call it the Plague Island. Why? Well, I'll get to explaining. In the late 18th and early 19th centuries, this fortified island was used as a quarantine station. Over 160,000 infected folks were brought here to live out their last painful days away from the healthier portion of the population. Many mass graves have been discovered nearby over the years, proving how unfortunate anyone who paid Poveglia a visit really was. Napoleon stored weapons on this island as well, and when it was discovered, many small battles were waged. This, of course, added to the island's body count. Even later on, a mental hospital was built on the island. Legends say that one of the doctors in charge would treat his patients horribly, often torturing them and tossing them from the bell tower. With all these horrifying historic events taking place on the island, it's no wonder that folks think it's haunted. In fact, there's absolutely zero public access to this island. The folks in charge have deemed it too dangerous to visit. Venturing out to Poveglia is literally illegal. What could they be hiding out there? The wild and wicked history makes folks think that there might be something sinister waiting in the sandy shadows. Anyone else craving pizza all of a sudden? Maybe pasta and parm? Or am I the only one who gets hungry after talking about ghosts? Is that weird? Anyways, what did you guys think of the video? Were you familiar with the Italian urban legends I selected?
5 on this list is Helen Sharman. Dr. Helen Sharman was the first ever British woman to go to space. She went in 1991 on a mission to the Soviet space station. Dr. Helen Sharman is extremely well educated, renowned in her community, and is one of the very few people in the history of humankind who's actually been to space. Therefore, I hold her opinion in extremely high regard when we're referring to something like extraterrestrial life. And her opinion is that said life is already here. Dr. Helen Sharman told The Observer's magazine that aliens exist. There's no two ways about it. There must be all sorts of different forms of life. She went on to say in her interview that it's possible they're here right now and we simply can't see them. Like I said earlier, this is an actual astronaut who's saying this right now. Someone who very clearly knows far more about this than your average Joe and whose opinion should be acknowledged. Now, just because one person believes that alien life could potentially be on Earth, well, that's far from fact. but oftentimes when we think about aliens and the potential of them being on our planet, it can easily get chalked up to some mumbo jumbo from people who aren't well researched or properly educated on the topic. That certainly can't be said about Helen Sharman, and I think that the fact that someone of this background is openly coming out and giving this opinion shows that the culture surrounding aliens is changing. I think that as time goes on, we'll see a lot more individuals like Helen come out and express this opinion, further adding to the validity of alien life living among us. Number 4 on this list is Oumuamua. Oumuamua was first discovered on October 19th in 2017, and it holds the title as being the very first discovered interstellar object to visit our solar system. Now, even though this object isn't necessarily evidence of aliens being here on Earth, a lot of people look to it as evidence of aliens' existence as a whole. The biggest name on this list of alien believers being Avi Loeb. Avi is a Harvard professor for astrophysics and has made it known that he doesn't think this object entering our solar system is your typical comet or asteroid. He's come out and said that this object is actually an alien probe sent to search for other life in the universe. In fact, he wrote, Oumuamua may be a fully operational probe sent intentionally to Earth's vicinity by an alien civilization. One of the biggest reasons he thinks this and others believe it is due to this object's strange movement. The speed at which this object is flying doesn't seem to fit in with our current laws of physics. The object is simply moving too fast for the gravitational pull that we believe to be acting upon it. It's also flipping and maneuvering itself in a way that doesn't seem to make any sense. Now, this thing is wildly far away, so even though we can get a rough estimate of how big it is, and it certainly is very sizable, it's hard to know for sure exactly what this thing is. He has faced some backlash in the scientific community for his claims, but then again, everybody who comes out and talks about aliens typically does. All we know for sure about this thing is that it came from a completely different solar system and seems to be accelerating in speed, which doesn't make any sense to anyone. I don't want to wholeheartedly jump on the alien train simply because of this logic, but I also don't think that immediately writing off a Harvard astrophysics professor is the smart thing to do either.
The Texas Zoo creature. So we take a look at a lot of UFOs on this channel, so I thought I'd change it up a bit and take a look at a bizarre looking creature instead. This picture was taken just 1 year ago, back in May of 2022. It was taken by a security camera at a zoo in Amarillo, Texas at around 1:30 a.m. A bizarre figure was spotted on a security camera, and before you say it's just a lion on its hind legs, which would also be pretty freaky, mind you, this figure was outside of the zoo, so it's not one of the animals unless one of them escaped. Now, why am I putting this on an alien list? A lot of people think it looks like a werewolf or Sonic the Hedgehog or something, but I don't know. To me, it looks pretty alien. Look at the elongated back part of the head. It almost looks like a xenomorph from Alien or something. Plus, I find the presence of alien life to be far, far more likely than werewolves or other kinds of fantasy-based creatures like that. I mean, like, who knows, but there's a lot of unexplored space out there and a lot of explored space here on Earth. I think we'd have spotted a werewolf by now if they existed. There's also a big chance that this could just be a trick of the camera. Security footage can be kind of janky sometimes, or perhaps we have a zoo prankster on our hands, or maybe this is a super deformed person. If that's the case, I hope they're okay. Regardless though, this is an odd figure to see in the middle of the night outside of a Texas zoo. And trust me, I know my Texas zoos. The Wales UFO. I didn't know this, but it turns out there are a lot of UFO sightings in Wales. I don't know what the aliens' fascination is with Wales, but reports date all the way back to the 1940s. Actually, all the way back to the 12th century, but I don't know if I give much credence to stuff dating back that far. Apparently, religious pilgrims believed to have seen a fire-breathing dragon erupt from the sea and fly into the sky. Could have been a UFO and they just didn't know what to make of it and just called it a dragon, but anyway, way off topic. The UFO in question here was spotted back in September of 2016 by a police helicopter at around 9 p.m. It was only visible on the chopper's thermal camera and seemed to be moving at a speed of 106 miles per hour over the Bristol Channel. Full video of the footage was released by a former cop, Gary Hasseltine, who has been urging the UK government to come forward and reveal what they know about UFOs. What's also interesting about this one is that the object was moving against the wind, so it is or was being operated one way or another. It's not like it was some object caught up in a wind current or something. Police also stated years after the event that it could have possibly been a drone, but they were struggling to keep up with it, so it'd have to be a pretty fast one. There are drones that reach that 100-mile-per-hour speed, but they're pretty high-end. Your common drones clock in at around 45 to 70 miles per hour, so again, who knows, but it's possible. And coming in at our number 1 spot, we have aliens in Bolivia. I wanted to finish off with this one because we have reports of both your typical UFO sighting and reports of actual aliens being spotted here, so we're getting some real bang for your buck with this one. The story just happened back in March of this year, and it all started when residents of a small village in the La Paz area of Bolivia claimed to have spotted a mysterious green light in the sky. A bunch of people pulled out their phones and started filming. They were in absolute awe and said it looked to be some kind of alien spacecraft. And then 2 days later, little people were spotted running around the town at night. One villager named Rita Marquez reported to news outlets describing the creatures as little, almost like goblins, and is quoted saying they were miniature beings, like those little people who appear to children. And it felt like something creepy was happening, like they were welcoming their friends, you know? Now, I'm not sure exactly what she means by that, but it's definitely odd. This bizarre situation all culminated with several residents claiming to have found one of the small creatures curled up dead in a gutter one morning, the body of which soon vanished. So we clearly have a lot going on here. Weird lights in the sky, possibly even an aircraft spotted, little beings running around the streets at night, a dead one, unfortunately. It's all pretty weird, and sure, it's possible it's just a hoax or even maybe mass hysteria, but there's also a good chance that it isn't. I love stories like this where there are multiple witnesses. Again, it adds another layer of credibility to the whole thing because obviously it's a lot harder to organize a hoax and get multiple people involved. People talk, you know, they let secrets out. Another interesting thing about this one is that authorities did get involved and told the villagers to kind of stay hushed about the whole incident, so maybe they just thought everyone was nuts and didn't want to spread misinformation, but perhaps there is something going on here that they need to cover up for one reason or another. Either way though, something happened. Are they among us? We may soon find out.
Well, autopsy. Perhaps one of the most famous pieces of lost alien footage is the infamous Roswell autopsy tape. Maybe you've heard of it. If you're a UFO enthusiast like me, no doubt it's come up before at some point. Roswell was kind of the birthplace of UFO mania, where a lot of the first conspiracy theories and a lot of the public ideas we have about aliens really stem from. If you don't know somehow, the story goes that an alien craft crash landed in Roswell, New Mexico, where it was swiftly apprehended by shadowy government agents looking to pull a curtain over the whole thing. Reverse engineered, studied, down to the pilot of the craft, recovered by FBI scientists. Almost immediately after, hushed whispers and rumors of a recorded alien autopsy set conspiracists and enthusiasts' mind ablaze in equal measures. Recorded footage of an alien body being dissected would be undeniable proof with world-shattering consequences, and would probably make for some pretty good ratings. Well, the Fox network would agree with you, because in 1995, the footage was broadcasted on Fox, presented by legendary thespian and #1 guy to trust in regards to human-alien relations, one Jonathan Frakes. The film broadcast was not the true footage of the autopsy, but rather a high-budget recreation to show for a wider public audience what had happened. The director claims he had seen the original footage from the 1947 autopsy, but couldn't release it. He claims that he spliced shots from the original footage into the faked footage to provide some clarity, but didn't tell us what was real and what wasn't. And he insists that the video wasn't faked, but rather a reconstruction for educational purposes. Now, despite only being a reenactment, the special effects of the footage are remarkable. It does look pretty believable. It was helmed by industry legend Stan Winston, the special effects warlock responsible for bringing the Predator and the aliens alike. The alien body in the footage was filled with sheep guts, chicken entrails, pig knuckles, and raspberry jam to create the illusion of an alien filled to bursting with foreign organs, and probably tasted halfway decent with a little bit of soy sauce. So was the footage ever actually real, or was it all just cooked up to sweep up viewers on a dwindling TV season? The director maintains always that what he saw was real, he just wasn't allowed to show it, and did his best to show us what happened. There's an interesting discussion to be had there, I think. Was he just showing how easy it is to fraud something, manipulate people into believing whatever they see? Who's to say if the true footage ever did come out, we would even even believe it. We would probably just dismiss it the exact same way. But if you want to see way more scary footage, real or not, dismissible or provable, we have got loads and loads of that for you to enjoy. So click through, stay a while, and get scared all night long with top 5 scary. I'll be here the whole night and in this building. Number 4, Edgar Mitchell. The thing about most alien sightings is that they don't always come from the most reputable of sources. You know, it's usually a random internet post, maybe a blurry shot from an iPhone kind of thing, posted on Reddit with a caption like, "What is this?" Or, you know, it's somebody who was walking home late at night and saw some lights in the sky and didn't know it was a plane. And while I think we should respect the voice of the people and the common man, it'd be nice if we got someone with a little bit of clout to their name. Well, luckily we've got more than a few astronauts who've seen bizarre things up there and are willing to share their stories. Edgar Mitchell is one such man. He's stood on the face of the moon before. He helped save the Apollo 14 mission from becoming a disaster. He's the 6th man to ever walk on the moon, and he is a lifelong defender and believer in aliens and UFOs. Mitchell claims that he's seen things that prove existence of life outside the planet. First and foremost, he is a firm believer of the Roswell conspiracy, and he insists that all those stories are true and that the military has been hiding the truth behind what happened at Roswell for decades, adding on to say that it was buried, and the military propagated a covert movement to discredit everything that had happened at Roswell, to deter people from taking any news about UFOs and flying saucers seriously, dismissing it forever as tinfoil hat stuff. Mitchell claims that NASA believes the public wouldn't be able to handle the truth. Come on, we're ready. We're ready, we're all ready, we're big enough now to know the truth. It's like the tooth fairy, we're grown up, we know where the quarters are coming from, just tell us. And Edgar Mitchell's been trying to just tell us. In 2004, Edgar Mitchell told a Floridan newspaper that he knew there was a secret cabal inside the American government that took in and studied alien corpses, and that after JFK was removed from office, the group did not answer to the president and didn't include the commander-in-chief in their briefings. He was quoted saying, "They all know that UFOs are real. The question is where they are coming from." A shadowy organization existing outside the president's control with insider knowledge on aliens and trying to suppress the public. Did Mr. Mitchell just casually confirm the Men in Black are real? Now, NASA themselves obviously denied all of Mitchell's statements, but obviously they would. What government is going to throw their hands up and admit that they have been slicing up alien bodies on the side?
Coming in at number 3, we've got the Empire State Bermuda Triangle. You're all familiar with the actual Bermuda Triangle, right? You know, the mystical portion of ocean between Miami, San Juan, and Bermuda that supposedly disappears ships, planes, and anything else that passes through? Well, apparently there's a spot like that in New York, sort of. If you ask around long enough, you might hear the tale of the Midtown Bermuda Triangle. In 2008, folks started noticing something odd. All sorts of cars would die for seemingly no reason and refuse to start back up again. It happened so often that people started looking for reasons why. Someone made the observation that all of these shutdowns seemed to be happening within 5 blocks of the Empire State Building. Mechanics got used to driving out, towing the dead cars a few blocks, and having them work perfectly once again. There are all sorts of theories as to why this happens, but the prevailing idea is that radio signals coming from the Empire State Building's broadcast tower were causing some sort of interference. Maybe they were inadvertently screwing with car alarm systems, stopping them from starting. However, this problem seems to have solved itself without anyone really addressing what was going on. So, was there a mysterious dead zone around the Empire State Building, or were folks just reading too far into their car troubles? Coming in at number 2, we've got mole people. We started with some underground reptiles, now let's get to some mammals. Humanoid mammals. Deep below the city, among the many subway tunnels and sewer systems, lives a city of people not accustomed to sunlight. Mole people. Well, probably not actual mole people, it's just a nickname they all got for living underground. In all likelihood, there are plenty of people living under New York. There are over 700 miles of subway tracks, plenty of which are closed off. So there's lots of space to set up a subterranean life. Rumors of these people living below the surface date back to the 1800s when the subway was first being built. The city had done its best to prevent people from settling in under there, but that's much easier said than done. Often subway construction gets delayed when workers come face to face with some of the tunnel dwellers. If someone was trying to run a train through your house, you'd be unwilling to move too. And finally, at number 1, we've got Cropsey. Oh, now this one is spooky. A legend among Staten Island youth, Cropsey is a figure shrouded in mystery. Some say that he was a respected member of the community that went mad after his son died. Others claim that he was admitted into a mental institution, became a janitor, and then started to kill. The origin story changes from person to person, but his actions do not. Cropsey kidnaps and kills children. He's the Staten Island boogeyman. Summer camps and island tours galore love to scare the daylights out of folks by telling them the tale of the killer on the loose. There's even a slasher movie from the 80s that features a Cropsey character. It's called The Burning. But get this, the legend might actually be true. Sure, he's not around anymore, but it turns out there really was a mad janitor who kidnapped and killed children. Andre Rand worked at Willowbrook, a now defunct mental institution on the island. In 1987, Rand was convicted of kidnapping and murder and racked up more charges later on. Did he inspire the legend, or was he inspired by it? We may never know. Rand is currently serving 2 sentences of 25 to life, but it's doubtful he's getting out. There's a fascinating and freaky documentary about the story of Cropsey that came out in 2009 that investigates the events surrounding the legend. Right on. The concrete jungle seems a little more cursed than before, doesn't it? Rent prices aren't the only scary thing out there.
Number 5 is the abduction of Frederick Valentik. It all began on the evening of October 21st, 1978. The 20-year-old Australian pilot took off from Moorabbin Airport in Melbourne, embarking on a routine flight in a single-engined Cessna 182L, a plane he's flown countless times in the past. Frederick departed for a training flight to King Island over the Bass Strait between the Australian mainland and Tasmania. However, what began as an ordinary flight soon turned into a bone-chilling encounter with the unknown. As Valentik flew over the Bass Strait, he reported to air traffic control that an unidentified aircraft was following him. He fearfully described the object as having 4 bright lights and flying at unfathomable speeds. Air traffic control attempted to identify the mysterious craft, but could find no evidence of any other aircraft in the vicinity. The situation took a grim turn when Valentik's communication became increasingly distressed, and he reported that the unidentified craft was orbiting him from above. He described the UFO's appearance as metallic and shiny, and praised its maneuverability. It was then that his communications would abruptly cut, with the last thing heard from him being, "It's not an aircraft." Just before the communications were cut off, a loud metallic scraping was heard from Frederick's radio. Neither him nor his aircraft were ever seen again. Speculation around Valentik's disappearance quickly spread, with theories ranging from mundane explanations such as pilot error, mechanical failure, or deliberate disappearance, to the more sensational ones involving extraterrestrial encounters. Based on the information we have, all signs point to Frederick being abducted by some sort of malevolent aliens. The reported scraping noise heard before his communications were cut, likely the sounds of the pilot's aircraft being stuffed into a UFO. The true fate of Frederick Valentik remains a mystery, but the Australian government has assumed him dead after spending many long hours searching for the missing pilot. Where do you think he might be? Let us know in the comments. Moving on, we have number 4, Travis Walton. One fateful night, November 5th, 1975. The Apache Sitgreaves National Forest in Arizona, USA. Travis Walton, a 22-year-old logger, and his crew were returning home after a long day of hard work when they noticed some sort of metallic, glowing disc in the sky. Curious to see what it was, Walton and crew drove closer to the flying object. Once they got close enough to investigate, the forestry worker left the car to get a closer look and approached the hovering craft. Witness accounts vary on exactly what transpired, but the consistent chilling detail was that a bright blue-green beam of light suddenly emanated from the UFO, striking Travis and sending him flying several feet backwards, knocking him unconscious. Seeing this, his crew immediately fled the scene, assuming the blast of light killed Walton, leaving him behind. And before you go in the comments calling Walton's friends fake, don't worry. They returned a few minutes later, only to find that both Travis and the UFO had vanished. The crew was quick to report the incident to the local authorities, and a massive search operation was launched to find Travis Walton. No matter how hard anyone looked, nobody could find him. That was until 5 days later. Travis would reappear, disoriented and confused, in Heber, Arizona, nearly 30 miles away from the original abduction site. But the story he had to tell of the intervening days is the truly chilling part of this tale. According to Travis, after being struck by the beam of light, he awoke aboard an alien spacecraft. He described encountering beings he could only describe as humanoid, but with large bald heads and enormous black wraparound eyes. He reported undergoing grueling medical examinations and being surrounded by strange technology aboard the craft. During his captivity, Travis experienced some form of telepathic communication with the beings, claiming that they conveyed a sense of curiosity and concern, as if they were studying him. Despite all of this, Travis said that he never felt physically harmed by the entities. After what seemed like mere hours to Travis, he found himself back on Earth, disoriented and unsure tour of where he was and unaware of how much time had elapsed. Travis Walton's encounter with aliens remains one of the most infamous abduction stories of all time, and has certainly earned its place on this list.
Number 3. The first flying saucer. Now, while the Roswell, New Mexico incident was the UFO sighting that really shot alien sightings into the mainstream public consciousness and kind of defined what alien sightings look like, you know, the idea of little gray or green men and flying saucers, it was obviously far from the first alien sighting ever recorded, just kind of the most popular. But not even a few weeks earlier, there was actually another famous sighting, and one that's thought to be the progenitor for sightings of UFOs being thought of as flying saucers. Kenneth Arnold was an American aviator. Unlike most UFO sightings, Kenneth never changed his story once, never made any kind of surrealist, outrageous claims, and stuck to the same story for the rest of his life. He saw weird saucers in the air he couldn't explain. Well, let's take a listen. It was 1947, June the 24th, weeks before Roswell, which occurred in July 1947. Mr. Arnold was flying his private plane over Washington by Mount Rainier. I've never been to Washington, so you guys gotta forgive me. He was looking for a recently downed transport plane that had a $5,000 bounty the US military was offering in exchange for its finding. As he was approaching the summit, Arnold noticed that he saw 9 blinding flashes of light hovering up above. When looking in closer, they resembled ships but looked like discs. Arnold said that he saw them flying in a bizarre pattern, with each positioned diagonally together, reporting that it reminded him of the tail of a kite. Arnold was an aviation expert and said that the craft seemed far more advanced than anything human beings were capable of at the time, moving at unbelievable speeds. He landed at a nearby airport and told crew that he saw something bizarre he couldn't rationalize, worried that perhaps it could have been missiles being fired at Washington. Reporters interviewed him and he was pressed for several questions, but no one could corroborate or figure out just exactly what it was he had seen. Arnold was questioned by the Army as well, who took his claims remarkably seriously, as he was a fairly respected and reputable man, and there wasn't really the same culture surrounding aliens and UFOs, and as such, his claim was met with genuine worry. No one ever figured it out, but the story of them being saucers, combined with the saucers seen in New Mexico, led to the public perception of UFOs picturing them as saucers for the better part of 60 years, pretty much to this day. Number 2. The Travis Walton abduction. Now, abduction stories can sometimes be a little much to believe, even for those with the most open minds who want to believe. You know, they all seem kind of the same. It's somebody you maybe can't trust driving home late at night, saw something strange, they woke up in a blinding light room and they got poked and prodded by little gray men. Well, Travis Walton's story is not dissimilar to that. It's pretty out there even by abduction standards, but it's too juicy to pass up, so pop open those ears. In 1975, Travis Walton was working as a logger and was facing a fairly routine day, 6 other loggers and him driving around in the forest, when they saw something incredibly bright shining at them through the treetops. One of the men claimed it looked like a flattened disc, a saucer of sorts even. Walton stepped out of the bed of the truck to investigate and was struck by some invisible force that knocked him backwards. The rest of the crew panicked and drove away. Huge faux pas, I'll say, leaving your coworker behind after being struck by an alien, but okay, you think you know somebody. When the crew returned, Walton had vanished. Walton awoke and had thought that he'd been taken to a hospital because he'd found himself in a blindingly bright room and could hear people moving around him. But it wasn't until he got a good look at his doctors that he knew something was amiss. 3 feet tall, with brown, quarter-sized pupils, with marshmallow-like skin. Walton freaked out, obviously, as one would probably do, and was swiftly restrained by his captors. He tried to fight them off, but was greeted by a tall creature he said resembled a humanoid, but was masked by an intimidating helmet, a kind of Darth Vader looking thing. The masked creature took Walton and escorted him back into the operating room and put a translucent mask over his face. And Walton drifted out of consciousness again, unsure if anything was real. The next thing he remembers is walking alongside a highway as if nothing had ever happened. He eventually finds his way to a phone and called his brother-in-law, who panically asked what had happened. It turned out that Walton had been gone for 5 days, and he was untraceable. Search parties had formed looking for him, sent dogs and choppers tracked him from the woods, but no one could find any sign of him, as if he'd blinked out of existence and then blinked right back. Travis swore what happened to him was real, a real abduction, and he's maintained that story ever since that fateful week in 1975. Now, if you think this story is fascinating and you're upset that nobody recorded any of it and there wasn't any footage of what Travis described, well, the tragic news is, yeah, it doesn't exist. You can, however, watch a 90s sci-fi movie that is directly based off Travis's case called Fire in the Sky. I've never seen it, but I'm sure it's on Amazon Prime or something. It's got Robert Patrick from Terminator 2. He's in it. He's a good actor. Yeah, check it out. And number 1, the Rendlesham Forest Incident. The incident and conspiracy at Roswell, New Mexico is one of the most famous events in UFO culture. This incident is considered England's Roswell, the Rendlesham Forest Incident. Few other alien sightings can boast this many government witnesses, memos, and strange proof. Let's paint the scene. It was December 26, 1980. Oh, nice and festive and Christmas themed. Surrounding Rendlesham Forest in Suffolk, England was a series of Air Force bases and US Army personnel. 2 of these stationed officers were John Burroughs and Jim Peniston. On this fateful night, the 2 of them were concerned by shining bright lights that were seen flying above the base, worrying that it could perhaps have been a threat or a spy plane scouting out their location. Burroughs said that he thought the lights looked like a beacon summoning people over, and over 40 people on the base all agreed, reporting seeing the lights and sharing their concern. So the 2 men were sent over to Rendlesham Forest to investigate. In their official document, the 2 men claimed that they had seen a strange, shining, triangular object that was pulsing with colored lights. Neither of the men recognized it as an aircraft from any military across the globe. The craft had seemed far too advanced for anything of this world. Black and made out of a smooth, opaque glass. It didn't appear to have any wings or landing gear or even really any methods of propulsion or exhaust. The men describe it as covered in hieroglyphic-like symbols etched onto the hull of the vessel all over. Neither of the men could identify the glyphs as anything they'd seen before. Duh, it's alien stuff. As the craft touched down, nearby animals were being driven into a frenzy, and the airmen's equipment started malfunctioning, communications equipment cutting out. The 2 personnel could no longer call back to the base. Now, not even 2 days later, the Rendlesham UFO was spotted again. 2 days later, the same strange lights were seen hovering above the bases surrounding Rendlesham. This time, the crews came significantly more prepared, waiting and ready for the UFO to make contact. The patrol group had found depressions in the ground, and their Geiger counters started blowing up with noise. And the group had known that they'd come across where the UFO had been. And then, right on time, the patrol saw the same craft flying above overhead, disappearing into the night. Years passed, and we're still no closer to understanding just what occurred to those faithful sightings.
We've got water blades. While this may be a tale told around the world, it seems to have a strong presence in Italy. Sure, the name sounds cool, maybe even conjuring up some images of wicked aquatic swords, but the reality of water blades is horrific. In fact, if you really like water parks, you might want to skip this entry altogether. I don't want to just ruin them forever for you. We've all heard of razor blades and other assorted sharp objects showing up where they shouldn't. Halloween candy, playground equipment, door handles, and more. But those are all relatively controllable once you've realized the present danger. Water blades, on the other hand, will rip and tear until there's nothing left. The urban legend floating around implies that some folks have been fastening razor blades to parts of water slides at popular theme parks in Italy. You can imagine what might happen if someone went slip sliding down one of these horrible traps. Maim is an understatement in cases like these. Thankfully, this urban legend seems to be staunchly set in the false category. For something that purportedly happens quite often, reports of such activity are very rare. The actual affliction of rapidly descending individuals doesn't seem to happen. Still, the legend must be very effective, especially because it seems to get told so often. I suppose the lesson to be learned from this one is be careful using public facilities. Good advice, especially in these days and times. Coming in at number 4, we've got Pier Zanfretta's alien encounters. Everyone knows a friend of a friend who claims to have been abducted by aliens, and if not abducted, then maybe they saw a UFO or something. But this Italian security guard has a claim to fame so out there it might as well be in outer space. He says that he was abducted by aliens 5 times over the course of 3 years. All abductions happened in Genoa, all apparently while he was still working the night shift. Skeptics, as skeptics do, dismiss these claims, but apparently he's given details of each abduction while under the influence of truth serum. Pretty astronomical, don't you think? The very first abduction occurred late one night. Zanfretta was patrolling and saw what appeared to be 4 lights. After seeing this, the engine, lights, and radio went out in his patrol car. Thinking, as most security guards should, that there might be thieves about, he ran over to investigate. He did not discover a group of miscreants though. No, he found himself face to face with some extraterrestrial life. A UFO was floating above and he was abducted by these outer space dwelling individuals. While approaching the so-called scene of the crime, Zanfretta was grabbed from behind. When he turned around, he saw a creature he could only describe as an enormous, green, ugly, and frightful creature with undulating skin, as though he were very fat or dressed in a loose gray tunic, no less than 10 feet tall. This, of course, was only the beginning of Zanfretta's galactic incidents. He's run into interplanetary assailants again and again, sometimes even when he had backup. Following some encounters, special investigators were called in. They discovered distinct markings on the ground that didn't seem of human origin, but nobody but Zenfreda has laid eyes on the creatures themselves. His claims have intensified the belief of an alien presence near Genoa and has made a bit of a celebrity out of the now elderly security guard. His last abduction took place in 1980 while he was under close observation. These days he claims that the aliens contact him directly, communicating with questionable motivation. So if you're at all interested in close encounters with the third kind, Genoa might be the place to be.
Number 3 on this list is alien bacteria. One of the biggest knocks against any argument associated with aliens is that our solar system hasn't shown any signs of life except for Earth. This isn't necessarily true though, based on a recent study that has come out in regards to Venus. Venus is one heck of a planet and certainly not somewhere that I would want to live. The storms are mighty, the temperature is way too hot, and acid regularly rains down from the sky. Not the ideal location if you ask me. One thing that Venus is also home to is a rare poisonous gas, phosphine. Now you're probably thinking, well, how would a poisonous gas indicate any signs of alien life? Wouldn't it indicate the opposite? And in most cases you might be right. However, phosphine is almost always linked to the presence of life. On Earth, phosphine is produced by microorganisms as they digest organic matter. This is why we consider it to be a biosignature and an indicator of life. Venus is certainly different from Earth, and we can't simply apply what makes sense here to Venus without asking some questions. However, this is a strong indicator from scientists that life is certainly possible from Venus. We've also seen before that Mars might contain some life. These two planets may not house the typical alien life that you may picture in your brain, but a bacteria from Venus or Mars is just as alien as somebody flying down in a UFO. Is it not possible that somehow, through our extensive history, debris from Venus or debris from Mars landed on Earth and developed life here? Maybe we never even realized that this life was alien to begin with. Number 2 on this list is microorganisms. We just talked about how Venus could be the host to life, bacteria or other small organisms that we've yet to identify. Well, one of the biggest arguments against aliens living among us is that we haven't seen them yet. Sure, there have been some stories here and there, but nothing on a major and global scale. What if we aren't looking properly though? What if our understanding of life doesn't match with what an alien life form is? Scientists have thought deeply about this possibility and what this could mean. This life, seeing as it would not compute with our definition of life, would actually live in what experts refer to as a shadow biosphere. Now, this shadow biosphere isn't some alternate dimension or ghost realm, but it's a biosphere with organisms that have a completely different biochemistry than we're familiar with. We're made up of carbon and nitrogen, but why are we automatically assuming that an alien would be made up of this as well? It could be just as likely that alien beings are made up of other elements. If this was the case, then it's most likely on a microscopic scale, and that's why we haven't been able to recognize them yet. We currently have a very limited way of studying microbes, and we need to be testing for a very specific microbe to know what it is. If we aren't searching for the proper microbe though, then it's very likely we could miss it. A lot of scientists have gotten on board with this shadow biosphere train and talked about its legitimacy. Once again, this isn't damning proof that there are aliens out there, but it does mean that there isn't damning proof against them either. Just because we don't see alien life, it doesn't mean that it's not here. Number 1 on this list is the 2004 UFO sightings. Now, I just used this point in a previous video called Top 5 Scary Discoveries the Government Doesn't Want You to Know About, and I do hate reusing the same point, but it just has to be included in this video as well. For those who aren't aware, the 2004 UFO sightings happened very close to San Diego by the United States Navy. These sightings were by multiple people and even caught on video. Just like in our last top 5 video, I want to play some of the footage so you guys can see what I'm referring to here. Those videos were caught by the US Navy and weren't released to the public until years after it happened. As you can see in those clips, the UFO that is flying through the sky doesn't look like anything man-made at all. The way it moves through the air is unlike anything we've been able to build. For instance, one of the Navy officers reported seeing it cruise at 60,000 feet and then immediately dropping to only 50 feet above the sea. It did this without making a sonic boom and did it almost instantly. That defies our current understanding of flying objects and leads a lot of people to believe this was from another intelligent species. Now, no one is sure if this object was being piloted by some sort of alien or if it was an alien probe operating by itself. I should also note that a UFO sighting isn't undeniable proof of alien life. It might just be something that we don't understand. However, the way that it flies through space has got to make us wonder. If something is flying through our air like that and it's that advanced, is it possible that something like that could have landed without us knowing? I think that might be a fair assumption, and if that's possible, then is it also possible that some sort of alien creature got out of said object and is now living among us? Frankly, I think that's also a fair assumption too. We obviously don't know for sure, but I think that this footage is some of the clearest proof that aliens living among us might be a reality.
First sighting or series of sightings, February 2023. February was quite a month for unidentified flying objects, and I wanted to start this list off with these sightings because of how recent they are. They may not be as definitive or weird as some of the other sightings on this list, but these were pretty high profile stories, and it's always far more interesting when the government is involved in these things. Just adds another layer of credibility to it. Not that the government doesn't lie or withhold information about things. I think we all know that happens. But the fact that it's being reported on so heavily means it's pretty big news. So the story here is that several mysterious high altitude objects were shot down in February of 2023 over various airspaces. We had objects being spotted in Canada, United States, Latin America, China, Eastern Europe. It started when several unidentified objects were shot down over Alaska, the Yukon, and Lake Huron. The general of NORAD, Glenn D. Van Herk, made a statement saying the objects could be benign, but it wasn't 100% sure. When asked if they could be of alien origin, though, that's the question we're all digging to ask, he said he just wasn't ruling anything out. I'm just interested by this. It really seems like the government and military agencies are starting to become more open to the idea of extraterrestrial life, or maybe some of them already are fully aware of their presence. Either way though, it seems like it's being discussed more. It's not being written off as nonsense like it has been in the past. So just that aspect alone is interesting to me. Now, here's another interesting thing about these cases. There were recovery attempts made, to find these objects that had plummeted towards the Earth. Unfortunately, they all landed in areas that aren't all that accessible, so it made for a pretty difficult recovery process, and the missions were pretty soon abandoned. Now, that's what they say, but what if the government actually did recover something that they just aren't ready or even willing to show us? Could be the case. You never know. Next up, we have the Oumuamua. Oumuamua, that's a hard word to say. I'm gonna try not to say it too many times on here. Old news with this one, right? It's that weird cylindrical object that was spotted flying through space. It's definitely been talked about plenty of times, including on this channel, I'm sure, but it's a recent article dated March 7th of this year that I'm referring to here. So, like I said before, I think when the government, military, or academics get involved with UFO type stories, it just makes it far more interesting to me. Not that I'd totally disregard some farmer in Ohio saying he was probed by a little gray, bug-eyed alien, but I don't know. People like attention sometimes. In a recent article written by Sean Kirkpatrick, head of the Pentagon's AARO, or All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, which specializes in unidentified flying objects, and a Harvard professor named Avi Loeb, they discussed the possibility that objects such as Oumuamua, spotted back in 2017, could be of alien origin. So pretty exciting. I mean, these are two learned, intelligent people writing an official document theorizing the possibility of alien life. I mean, that's just cool. The article does say, however, that the objects, like the Oumuamua, could be, quote, a parent craft that releases many small probes during its close path passage to Earth. So probes observing Earth could be good or bad or neutral, depending on whether you're a glass half empty or half full type person. Now, they didn't just discuss that object, they were looking at a variety of unidentified objects or probes, and they wanted to speculate that these crafts could potentially power their batteries from starlight, and that maybe Earth's water could be fuel. It's pretty wild stuff, and yes, a lot of it is speculative, but the fact that a highly respected scientist that spent 20 years studying physics is proposing these ideas, pretty fascinating. Something I also want to mention about people who are just very skeptical about aliens even showing any interest at all in Earth. You'll hear them say stuff like, well, extraterrestrial beings with all this advanced technology, they just wouldn't be interested in anything we're doing. It'd be like, God observing ants or something. And who's to say, first of all, that God doesn't like observing ants? And, even if that is the case, I mean, like, how can you really know that for sure? How on earth could we possibly know what beings from another planet are interested in? We don't know what kind of hobbies they have. It's also kind of counters their other argument, because it's like, yeah, spacefaring extraterrestrials would be leagues ahead of us in terms of intelligence, but I know what they're thinking. I know what they like. Just doesn't make any sense.
Coming in at number 3, we've got skinwalkers. These Navajo legends have been cited all over, but have quite a reputation in Arizona. Medicine men possessed by spirits having to choose between good and evil. Often hermits being exiled from their communities. They take the forms of many animals and travel through the wastes. If driving through the arid desert at night wasn't unsettling enough, just wait until you hear about what skinwalkers like to do. Often they'll travel alongside lone vehicles in the dark, even when the car is hoofing it. They'll tap on the windows of the vehicle, trying to get the driver's attention. If the driver stops to see what's going on and gets out of their car, it's not likely that they're coming back. Yikes. There are some hot spots that locals try to avoid at night. Apparently there's a ranch that has been given the name Skinwalker Ranch thanks to the huge amounts of reports made, and San Carlos Reservation is also a place most will warn you away from during the night. Although most forests at night have their fair share of spooky denizens. There's one tale of a man camping alone that really makes you question whether a little adventure is worth it or not. He was hiking along with his dog and found an empty cave to set up camp in. As he unpacked his stuff, he noticed some unsettling cave paintings along the walls. Later that same night, he was woken up by his dog ferociously barking. As he sat up to see what was the matter, he saw a malformed creature slinking near the entrance of the cave. Acting quickly, he shot at it with his rifle, but this only stunned the creature. It called out to him, saying that it wanted to help. Sure. At this point, the man grabbed his dog and hightailed it out of there, leaving all his stuff. He hasn't gone back since. Hopefully he didn't leave anything too valuable behind, although he did escape with his dog and his life, which are valuable enough. Coming in at number 2, we've got the Haunted Antique Mall. Back to Tucson for more terror and troubles, there's an old 2-story furniture store that was converted into an antique mall of sorts. You know the kind, set up like a flea market with all sorts of independent booths selling their wares. Well, one day customers were walking around upstairs looking at the assorted antiques, and they heard some clicking noises. One particularly curious antiquer decided to investigate and found the source. An old typewriter. The thing is, no one was around to operate it. The customers who had heard the typing were the only people upstairs. After that, more and more ghostly tales appeared. Furniture that was left neat and tidy at closing would be strewn throughout the aisles the next morning. Radios would increase in volume with no one around. Employees found themselves frozen in place from time to time, experiencing a distortion of time. They would be stuck there as customers passed by in fast or slow motion. Apparitions would appear all over, sometimes appearing as a grinning boy, other times as a mischievous-looking teenager. Nobody knows who these wraiths belong to. After hearing loud crashing noises upstairs but finding nothing displaced, the owners decided it was time to close down the upper level. Now, considering that all sorts of people were bringing in antiques from different sources, it is possible that all these ghosts came from haunted objects. Or it could be that the furniture store itself is haunted. Nobody's come up with concrete proof of the hauntings, but if you ever find yourself antiquing in Tucson, watch out for paranormal activity. And finally, at number 1, the ghosts of Slaughterhouse Canyon. I mean, the name of this canyon should be enough to give into its bad news. Let me say it again. Slaughterhouse Canyon. Come on. The tale that accompanies the terrifying name comes from the gold rush back in the 1800s. A young family moved out to try their hand at striking it rich. However, this plan did not go very well. Soon they were hungry and destitute. The father would often head out for days, searching for food to sustain him and his family. Tragically, one day he never returned. Without the father to keep them fed, the family slowly starved. As their bodies wasted away, so too did their minds. Eventually, the mother couldn't take it anymore. Her children's cries were too much for her to bear. She donned her wedding dress and ritualistically killed her children. Carrying the corpses down to the nearby river, she wept and screamed. After she dropped their bodies into the water, she wandered around until succumbing to starvation soon after. This sad story forever marred the reputation of Slaughterhouse Canyon. Now, if you visit at night, you might be able to hear the pained cries of the murderous Mad Mother. Tragic and terrifying. We've got sewer alligators. Iconic. I think New York's sewer alligators might have been one of the first urban legends I was familiar with as a kid. Showed up as a gag in a show I was watching or something. But it's a myth that doesn't seem to disappear. Hell, it even has an incarnation in one of New York's most famous pieces of media, Spider-Man. The lizard, anyone? There's something about the possibility of gigantic carnivores living in the New York City sewer system that has captured the imaginations of folks everywhere. Unfortunately, it's a story that begins with irresponsible pet ownership. Back in the early 20th century, plenty of posh people were looking for exotic pets to bring home with them. Why you would want an alligator in your penthouse is beyond me, but the rich and frivolous thought this was a smashing idea. Now, we all know this is a bad call, but hindsight wasn't quite a thing yet back then. So these folks brought baby alligators home and made cooing noises at their tiny green pals. However, they don't stay tiny and cute forever, so when these alligators became problematic, it was common for their owners to ditch them in any way they could. Some chose to flush them, but it's likely that they were too big at that point to fit down the pipes. This resulted in many being tossed down into the sewers at ground level. The legend says that these gators managed to do quite well for themselves in the dank tunnels, feasting on rats, growing up, and finding other alligators to have little alligator sewer babies with. This all came to a head in 1935 when the Times ran an article headlined, "Alligator Found in Uptown Sewer." A bunch of folks had located and killed an 8-footer out near the Harlem River, giving credence to the rumors. From there, the legend was cemented into city lore. The actual probability of alligators thriving in the sewers is next to none, but the believers keep on believing. Coming in at number 4, we've got Montauk Mind Control. SCP fans might recognize that name, Montauk. It's a hamlet at the far east end of Long Island. Because of this, it can be interpreted as the end, which kind of makes sense in that context. Stranger Things fans might have their ears perked up right now too, as rumors surrounding this village at the end of the island are basis for some parts of the show. There's an old military base out there known as Camp Hero. It's been shut down for a while, but there are whispers of some sinister stuff happening way back when. All sorts of top secret classified experiments are said to have occurred from the 60s through the 80s. The kind of stuff that would never go public because it's pretty messed up. It's almost sci-fi inspired, to be honest. Being at the end of the island lent them a fair deal of privacy, which meant the folks at the base could get up to all sorts of trouble. The big one that folks talk about has to be psychic experiments. Of course, experimenting on adults is no good. They're already fully developed and likely haven't exercised their psychic abilities. It's rumored that children were kidnapped and brought in and forced to undergo psychic experiments. They were put through all sorts of extreme tests and trials to see if they could unlock their hidden potential. Was it to create a new type of human weapon? Could it have been for the sake of espionage? Did anything really come of it? It really does smack of Stranger Things, doesn't it? An electrical engineer that claims to have worked at the site says they had alien technology there, which allowed them to turn kids into psychic warriors, which is a lot to claim, especially as it opens up the possibility of alien contact. These days, you can visit Camp Hero yourself whenever you want, as it's been converted into a state park. So maybe go and see if you can sense anything, or maybe even find some alien relics.
Oh, next up at number 3 is the many abductions of Russ Kellett. And yes, that's right, you heard many. In fact, Russ Kellett, a 58-year-old man from North Yorkshire, claims he's been abducted upwards of 60 times. And those are just the ones he remembers. The first time Kellett was abducted was when he was 16, when he was traveling home on his motorcycle until he saw a strange tunnel that he'd never seen before. Curious, he drove through the tunnel being faced with a bright light, and then the next thing he remembers is lying down on an operating table, surrounded by 15 feet tall alien men. He related their appearance to Dracula, minus the fangs. Kellett reported that the Dracula doppelgangers pushed a tube down his throat and pumped a mysterious liquid into him. He claims made him a super soldier. He recalls checkered rooms and special glass orbs used to control the navigation of spaceships, and has made several sketches of the parts of his abductions he remembers. Ever since that first abduction, Russ would battle in a multitude of intergalactic wars and conflicts, so he claims, having fought all sorts of different aliens, such as one race of aliens called the Dragos, which are tall and scaly and have dragon-like heads. After the aliens are satisfied with his work, they wipe his memory and send him back to Earth. These missions would vary in length, between lasting for days to lasting for years. However, from the perspective of us on Earth, he is only gone for hours at a time. His explanation for this was that time moves differently on the planets he's sent to fight on, where a day on one planet could be mere seconds on Earth. Skeptics were quick to dismiss Russ's accounts of his second life as an alien super soldier, but he claims he has proof. Last year, Russ was able to capture footage of what he says are several UFOs, the same ones that have been abducting him and taking him to the corners of space to fight space wars. Whether or not his outlandish story is true is for you to decide, but me personally, I'm not signing up to be drafted for any intergalactic wars. Moving on to number 2 is the most iconic abduction story of all time, the Barney and Betty Hill incident. The Barney and Betty Hill incident, which occurred on the evening of September 19, 1961, is one of the earliest and most influential cases of alien abduction in UFO history. The Hills, a married couple from New Hampshire, were driving home from a vacation in Canada. As they drove through the White Mountains of New Hampshire, Barney noticed a bright light in the sky that appeared to be following the couple everywhere they went. Out of concern, Barney pulled over to get a better look of the object through binoculars, and to their astonishment, they saw what appeared to be a disc-shaped craft with multicolored lights hovering in the sky. Unsettled, the Hills hastily re-entered their car and started driving again, with the mysterious craft still in pursuit. As they continued their journey, the Hills noticed something strange, that there were 2 hours that had passed that were completely unaccounted for. Over the following days, Barney and Betty began experiencing anxiety, bizarre dreams, and inexplicable memories of the encounter. In hopes of finding answers, the couple consulted with a local psychiatrist who used hypnosis to uncover buried memories of the event. Once under hypnosis, the Hills were able to recall the terrifying events that transpired in those lost 2 hours. They described being taken aboard the vessel and seeing these short aliens with grayish skin, large black eyes, and slits for mouths. Barney and Betty recounted being subjected to intense medical examinations, including the extraction of bodily fluids and having organs observed. They would go on to detail their feelings of fear and helplessness during the encounter too, saying that they felt like they were going to die. A great reminder of why we use anesthesia before performing surgeries, guys. After the media picked up their story, the Hills' lives changed dramatically. They faced both support and skepticism from the public, and their story ignited a broader fascination with UFOs and extraterrestrial life worldwide. Despite the enduring controversy surrounding their account, the Hills remained steadfast in their belief that they had indeed encountered beings from another world. Until their passing, they maintained their version of events, and their story has become a touchstone for anyone interested in investigating UFO abductions. What do you guys think? The story is just a hoax, or has it got some credibility? Comment below your thoughts and let me know. Finishing off at number 1 is the Berkshire County incident on the night of September 1st, 1969 in Berkshire County, Massachusetts. Multiple witnesses reported a series of UFO sightings and encounters. Residents all over the town recount seeing a UFO flying above and around Berkshire County, with statements remaining consistent with one another, making this one of the most plausible UFO abduction stories of all time. The most significant incident relating to this UFO involved 2 separate families who claimed to have experienced a close encounter with the unidentified craft. According to the witnesses' accounts, around 9 p.m., Tom Reed, a 9-year-old boy, was driving through the woods with his mother, grandmother, and younger brother. Suddenly, they would see a bright object descending from the sky. In response, Tom's mother stopped the car and they watched the object, which was about 40 feet in diameter, hover above the ground. Then, the next thing the family remembered was being in a different location entirely. They claimed that they were now about a mile down the road and the UFO was gone. The family would go on to report that in the following years, they experienced recurring nightmares and strange encounters, suggesting possible ongoing contact with the extraterrestrial entities. Other families in the town reported similar occurrences and UFO sightings around the same time. Over the years, the incident gained attention and underwent various investigations by UFO researchers and enthusiasts. Many try to explain the strange event as natural phenomena or mass misidentification, but the fact that so many people reported the same thing, it's hard not to believe them. This is the first time an entire town has been affected by alien intervention at the same time, and remains the most frightening cases of abduction due to its sheer scale alone.
5 on this list is the falling boy. This is a sad legend that's probably true. The Black Church is located in the Romanian city of Brasov and is a beautiful old Gothic church. It almost never made it to 2022 though, because several hundred years ago it had a horrible fire. The church did manage to survive and had a bunch of renovations done on it to spruce it up. It's around this period of time that people think the falling boy statue was erected. On one single pillar of the exterior of the church, there's a statue of a boy who looks to be falling over. Either that or he's searching for something on the ground. It's difficult to say for sure. Either way, no one has any idea why this statue is here, and 3 legends have come out explaining it. Arena Webb writes, some say that he was the son of a priest and that he was naughty. As a punishment, his father sent him in the church's attic. But then the Great Fire started, and so the boy got trapped in there. The statue was built depicting him trying to escape the flames. Another legend, and a more popular one, is that the boy was helping with the construction of the church. At one point, his boss told him to check if the wall is straight. He leaned over the walls and he fell. His boss felt guilty and ordered a statue. Others, though, say it was murder. They say that this boy was so good working at the construction of the church that a fellow worker got envious. He sent the boy to check the walls and he pushed him. The boy died, but the man couldn't live with the guilt, so he confessed shortly after. The other builders decided to make the statue in the boy's memory. So those are the 3 legends about the boy, and sadly all of them result in the boy's death. Now it's thought that his spirit still lingers here at this church, and if you're lucky, you may even be able to spot him. Comment down below what you guys think about this legend and which of the 3 stories you believe the most. Curious to know what you guys got. Number 4 on this list is the Pied Piper. You've most likely heard the name and probably the story of the Pied Piper before. If you haven't, then let me read off a great passage from Andre Diamond describing the tale. The Pied Piper legend originated in Hamelin, Germany during the Middle Ages. As the story goes, the town was struggling with a rat infestation problem and was desperate for relief. A mysterious man in pied clothing approached the mayor and promised he could rid the city of its problem in return for payment of 1,000 guilders. The mayor agreed, and the man played a magical pipe to lure all the city's rats to a nearby body of water where they drowned. When the piper returned for his reward, the mayor refused. As if visualizing a rat infestation was not traumatizing enough, the story then takes another sinister turn. Furious that he had been cheated, the piper soon returned to the town of Hamelin on St. John's and Paul's Day. As the grown members of the town attend church, the piper once again played his magical pipe through the streets, this time luring the town's 130 children from their homes. Depending on the version of the story, he either led them to the lake or into a cave, and none were ever seen again. Most versions agree there were a few children left behind. One was crippled and he could not keep up, one was deaf so he could not hear the music, and one was blind and could not see where the other children were going. When church let out, the survivors told the townspeople what had happened, and the rest is history. Now you're probably thinking, okay Nick, well what the hell does this have to do with Romania? Well, there's another version of this legend that says this man took the into Vagis Cave and then after a time slowly let them out. Vagis Cave is in Transylvania, and it's believed by the locals that this Pied Piper still lives there. They also think that this is the true version of the legend because there's a very large population of German-speaking Saxons in that area. These people are thought to be the descendants of the children who were taken so many years ago. Even to this day though, everyone still fears Vagis Cave and still fears the Piper. Number 3 on this list is the sacrificial lakes. Most of the time when somebody enters a body of water, they're worried about becoming food to the fish that live in the said. Most of the time when someone enters a body of water, they're worried about becoming food to the fish that live in said body of water. What they usually aren't as concerned with is becoming food to the actual water itself. That's exactly what some people in Romania believe in regards to some of their bigger lakes though. Lake Vinderel, for instance, is known to some locals as a lake which will actually swallow people up. Even the most skilled swimmers who go here will drown and never be heard from again. Most of the time these bodies are never found, but there's a legend that says a piece of bloody flesh floats on top of the water at all times. Lake Vinderel is one of the most famous, but it isn't the only lake in Romania that has some dark lore around it. One lake literally swallowed up an entire town when a slope collapsed and forced the homes along with a church inside the water. People around that area often hear the ringing of church bells as they pass by the lake, thinking that the spirits of those who died in this tragedy still haunt the area. Because of all this death in these Romanian lakes, it's now believed that sacrifices must be made to keep the water at bay. Yep, that's right guys, what better way to stop people from dying in the lakes than to have people specifically die from the lakes? That's the train of thought, and it's most prevalent in the Maramureș region of Romania amongst the elderly folk who live there. They think that the only way to calm the dark spirits who clearly inhabit these waters is to occasionally offer a human sacrifice. Now I'm gonna be honest, I wasn't able to find exact details on who has been sacrificed or when, but I imagine that this has taken place at least once in Romania's history if there's an entire legend around it. I also find it kind of interesting that the Romanians don't have a particular demon or creature in mind who could be behind this. As of right now, it's just thought that there's a dangerous entity in the lake water and that sacrificing a human should relax that entity at least for a little while. Either way, if you're going to go swimming in Romania, then stay away from the lakes.
Coming in at 2, the moving mother of Balinspittle. In July 1985, something strange occurred in the village of Balinspittle, Cork. While travelling home one evening, a local reported seeing a roadside statue of the Virgin Mary moving on its own accord. And while some summed it up to a trick of the light, countless other locals have also reported similar occurrences. People from the village as well as people from abroad flocked to the site where the activity seemed to be occurring, with up to 100,000 people said to have visited Balinspittle alone. The Catholic Church was of course a little uncertain of the legitimacy of the case, with one bishop outright calling it an illusion. According to a team of psychologists from University Cork though, the vision was the result of staring at stationary objects during the transient light of dusk. Anthropologist Peter Mulholland also said that the visions of the Virgin Mary in Irish culture is simply the result of the population's relationship with religion. However, what the answer is anyone's guess. There's plenty out there who truly believe the Mother of God did appear all over Ireland between July and August of 1985. And finally, coming in at number 1, the Black Cat of Killachy. Back in 1968, Margaret O'Brien and her husband purchased an abandoned home on the outskirts of Dublin City. However, they could have never predicted the events that were soon to unfold. Margaret originally intended to restore the property and turn it into an art centre, so she allowed several workmen to live on site to maintain pace. Soon though, the workmen began to report back to the O'Briens with some disturbing stories. After dark each night, they would hear animal sounds from within the walls of the house, even though they couldn't find any evidence of an infestation. Margaret disregarded their concerns, however she quickly came to learn of the building's strange condition herself. One evening when arriving at the house to speak with the project's lead painter, Margaret was met with more claims of wild animals loose on the property. So this time she agreed to stay the night in order to observe. Walking to her room, she saw for the first time a gargantuan black cat sitting in the middle of the hallway. She claimed the creature was no ordinary house cat, but rather panther-esque, with evil and intelligence in its gaze. In a split second though, the creature disappeared. Soon after the incident, the lead painter was visited by the huge cat, however this time it brought along with it mist. Due to all of these events, Margaret contacted a local priest to perform an exorcism on the home, as you would, which actually seemed to be effective, so Margaret finally opened the art centre. However, peace didn't last, because one evening a group of drunken actors decided to hold a seance in an attempt to call upon the monstrous cat that they had heard so much about. They were seemingly successful because the haunting resumed more powerfully this time, with the cat now being joined by the malevolent spirits of 2 nuns who began to terrorize the building's gallery. This time Margaret called for a medium for help and finally learned the truth of the cat. The medium told her that the female spirits had been attendants of the satanic rituals performed by the infamous Hellfire Club. She went on to suggest that the house was once owned by its members. Recently in 2012, the theory finally got some bulk, with another site said to have been frequented by Hellfire members, with a painting of a black cat bathed in flames being uncovered. Coming in at 5, Princess Brunhild at Rostrap. This legend goes that years ago there ruled a king in Bohemia whose castle was atop a loft mountain where thunder and eagles found a home. Now this king had a daughter, Princess Brunhild, whose beauty was famous far and wide. Rulers and their sons sought the hand of the maiden, and among the suitors came the son of the king of Hars, who won her heart. He returned to his father to announce his betrothal and to make arrangement for the nuptials. However, someone had other plans. A new suitor arrived for Brunhilde's hand, terrible giant who inhabited North Europe, terrifying all those who saw him. He brought with him costly gifts of gold, amber, and precious stones, and after a few days of consideration the king promised the giant his daughter. Now the giant had two steeds, one white as snow and the other black as night, both giant with the earth trembling beneath them as they ran. So one day Brunhilde begged to ride with the giant. She mounted the white steed and raced to be with her true love Hars. The black steed was in quick pursuit behind her. At the very top of the treacherous Rostrap, Brunhilde reached the cliff edge. However, her brave white stallion had other ideas and jumped right across the mountain and reached the other side. The giant, however, did not and ultimately plunged to his death. Atop the Rostrap hill in the Hars mountain range you will find the hoof shapes imprinted into the rock on the edge of the cliff, marking the path the great white steed took when freeing the trapped princess. Coming in at 4, the Watzmann Mountain. The Watzmann is a mountain in the Bavarian Alps and is the third highest in Germany, and the highest mountain located entirely on German territory. Now, for a mountain so famous throughout the country, you can imagine there would be a handful of legends associated with it. And that there are. One legend goes that in the deepest corners of southern Bavaria, a tyrannical king named Watzmann reigned the land, and enjoyed slavery and hunting local peasants. On one particular day, after a series of bloody killings, a curse was cast upon him and his family, which resulted in them all turning to stone. Now it is said that they are still entombed within the range of 7 mountains, near the town of Berchtesgaden. Would you climb this peak to discover if the legend is true? If so, I'll be right there with you.
Number 2. James McDivitt. James Alton McDivitt is an American test pilot, Air Force pilot, engineer, and NASA astronaut who flew in both the Gemini and Apollo programs. After graduating first in his class with a Bachelor of Science degree in aeronautical engineering, he qualified as a test pilot at the Air Force. In 1962, McDivitt was selected by NASA for the Gemini 4 mission. In 1965, he saw, filmed, and photographed an object which approached the Gemini 4 as they were orbiting Earth. Over Hawaii, a craft of some sort. The UFO had a long arm sticking out of it. Here's what Major James McDivitt said. "I was flying with Ed White. He was sleeping at the time, so I don't have anybody to verify this story, but we were drifting in space when suddenly an object appeared in the window. It's a cylindrical object, white. It had a long arm that stuck out of the side. The film was sent back to NASA and reviewed by some NASA film technicians. One of them selected what he thought was what they were talking about, at least before I had the chance to review it. And it was not the picture. It was a picture of a sun reflection on the window. So what were the pictures that he was talking about? In 1975, McDivitt said, "I never made a big deal out of it. It was something I definitely couldn't identify. It looked like a beer can with a pencil sticking out of it. Yeah, I would eventually give up on that too if those were my credentials and people were like, yeah, right, James." When somebody has like 25 years of designing and flying space shuttles around, when they say, "Hey guys, I'm seeing something up here," it's not like, "Oh, James, clean those old specs, would you? Yuck, yuck." Houston, we have a problem. And number 1, Gordon Cooper. Leroy Gordon Cooper Jr., an American aerospace engineer, test pilot, US Air Force pilot, and the youngest of the 7 original astronauts in Project Mercury, the first human space program in the United States. You know the pictures. It looks like they're wearing a tinfoil suit, you know? Old school, old school. After service as a fighter pilot in World War II, he qualified as a test pilot in 1956 and then was selected as an astronaut in 1959. In 1963, Cooper piloted the longest and last Mercury spaceflight, Mercury Atlas 9. 34 hours in space. The first American to spend an entire day in space, the first person to sleep in space, and the last American launched on a solo orbit mission. In Cooper's autobiography, Leap of Faith, co-authored by Bruce Henderson, he recounted his experiences with the Air Force and NASA and an alleged UFO conspiracy. Cooper claimed to have seen his first UFO while flying over Germany, then saw them land in a dry lake bed. Cooper claimed up until his death that the US was indeed covering up UFOs. He said that there were hundreds of reports made by his fellow pilots, many coming from the military pilots on radar. In his memoirs, Cooper wrote that he had seen unexplained aircrafts tons in his career, and that in 1978 he actually testified before the United Nations on the topic. He sadly passed in 2004. He was such a strong advocate for disclosure, and all of these astronauts are remembered as putting their neck and name out on the line for some truth. But I mean, those UFO enthusiasts, huh? They're all wackos, right? Right?
5. Arkansas the Dog Boy. Now the name may sound ridiculous, yes, but the story is truly chilling. If you find yourself at 65 Mulberry Street in the middle of a small Arkansas town of Quintman, you may very well encounter the hulking outline of a 300-pound, half-man, half-beast with glowing animal eyes. This is the Dog Boy. If you see him, walk quickly, as he is rumored to chase people down the street, biting at their heels, just like a dog. Now, this legend is rare, because the story behind the story may just be even creepier than the legend itself. Gerald Bettis, the only son of the Bettis family of 65 Mulberry, was reportedly a problem child, but not a cute one. No, this kid collected and tortured animals before turning his sociopathic focus to his parents, supposedly imprisoning them in their home and murdering his father. Bettis was eventually imprisoned for growing marijuana on his back porch and would later die in a state penitentiary in 1988 of a drug overdose. Spooky stuff. Coming in at 4, Colorado, Riverdale Road. Riverdale Road near Thornton, Colorado is crammed with horrifying legends to bring even the bravest paranormal investigator to their knees. Riverdale Road is notorious for having some of the most chilling and endless ghost stories, beginning with the fact that it is literally referred to as the gates to hell. Yeah, now the gates themselves are simply made of rusty iron, yet people travel from far and wide to visit them. This is because the man who built the gates lost his mind once they were finished. He then burned his entire mansion with his family asleep inside. Worse still, he was never caught or put on trial. As of now, people report that a lady in white walks the road close by the gates, with many assuming she is the man's wife, wandering, searching for her murdered children or even her husband. Another ghostly story goes that there are accidents that specifically happen to joggers all the time. Once upon a time, a jogger decided to take a jog along Riverdale Road and ultimately got hit. They sadly passed away, and rumor has it their spirit now haunts the road. People who walk the road are said to have heard a loud heartbeat and footsteps. If you drive by, you might also feel something hitting your car when there's literally nothing there. Now, there are so many more stories, but we'll end with the Native American shapeshifters. Now, what makes Riverdale Road interesting isn't just the road itself, but because the area of land that it cuts through is also rumored to be haunted. For hundreds of years, there have been countless stories about Native American shapeshifters roaming the land, with many passers-by spotting them on the road. According to reports, they take on different shapes and communicate with people in their own ways. They're also known to play tricks on anyone who walks down Riverdale Road, so be warned.
Number 2 on this list is the World War II ghosts. There's a town called Auchna-Muirs, and in that town there's a very specific mansion with some very interesting lore surrounding it. That mansion is called the Teleki Mansion. This mansion is really interesting because it didn't actually see much fighting at all, but is currently haunted with ghosts from World War II. The ghosts of these World War II soldiers who haunt this place sadly caused their tragic fate themselves. One evening, the soldiers went into the mansion and decided to enjoy a little bit too much wine. The mansion had cellars full of nice quality bottles, and the soldiers definitely overindulged. In fact, they got so hammered that they decided to start firing off their guns in the basement before passing out. They passed out in the cellar, and it's said that from the guns that they shot off, the wine started filling up the room. They were far too gone to notice and actually drowned in said wine. Now these soldiers haunt the mansion and locals see them regularly. In fact, some blurry photos were taken back in 2011 of these ghosts in the place. Dying is obviously worst case scenario and never what anyone wants, but I guess the one thing that you can say for these guys is that they probably died at least happy. Number 1 on this list is the Nymphs of Sioclavina Cave. Deep in the mountains of Transylvania, through a long road of rivers and beautiful scenery, sits a forgotten cave called the Sioclavina Cave. This cave is full of crazy stuff from the past and has been a really important find for archaeologists studying Romanian history. Tombs, treasures, skeletal remains, and most important, potential evidence of nymphs are all found in this mysterious cavern. In case you aren't familiar with what a nymph is, then Britannica tells us that they were usually associated with fertile, growing things such as trees or with water. They were not immortal but were extremely long-lived and were on the whole kindly disposed toward men. These were women in Greek mythology who were considered divinities. It's believed that this cave may have once been the home to some of them. The treasure that's been found here, some of the inscriptions that are on the wall, the overall environment outside the cave, all of it fits the bill when it comes to a nymph. At the very least, if a nymph or a group of nymphs hadn't have lived here, then people definitely think this would have been a site of worship for them. Animal carcasses were found here as well, and it's believed that they would have been used for some sacrificial rituals to such higher beings. Now this cave is researched extensively, and locals think that it might possess some mysterious powers. Also, that the rivers that run around this area are rich with minerals and other healing properties. I suppose this urban legend isn't super scary, but honestly kinda cool. Then again, nymphs have been known to be dangerous in the past, so if there was one lurking around this cave still, you wouldn't want to get on its bad side.
In at 5, Drunken Thady and the Bishop's Lady. In Limerick City stands an impressive piece of stonework by the name of Thomond Bridge, which spans the dark waters of the River Shannon. The bridge was built back in 1836 by a pair of designers named James and George Payne, and according to rumours, their last name would set the tone of future happenings for years to come. The story surrounding the bridge is that of Drunken Thady and the Bishop's Lady. Thady was the local troublemonger in Slovan, and the lady was the wife of the Bishop of Limerick. However, unbeknownst to her husband, she enjoyed a life of vice when the sun went down. One night, while both women were out and about on the bridge, they crossed paths with one another and began to fight, as you do. The Bishop's Lady attempted to push Thady into the river below. However, when she attempted to beg God to forgive her wicked ways and spare her life, the push was unsuccessful. The struggle only ended when the Bishop's Lady fell into the water instead and quickly drowned. Now, there are many who say the furious spirit of the Bishop's Lady haunts the Thomond Bridge, ready to pull late night walkers into the water below. However, don't fret, because apparently the Bishop Lady's fingerprints will appear on the stone side of the bridge before she pulls you below, so you have time to run. If you see fingers, run. Not all fingers are good fingers. Coming in at 4, the patron of Gravediggers Pub. The Gravediggers Pub has been standing since 1833 and is named for its original owner, John Kavanagh, who fathered 25 children and has a handful of descendants still alive today. And now the pub is in Glasnevin, which is also known for its cemeteries, both Glasnevin Cemetery and Prospect Cemetery, which lies directly beside the pub, in turn giving it its nickname. Due to this, one long-standing tradition is for patrons to order a pint by shoveling a scoop of graveyard dirt against the outside wall of the pub. So, as you would expect, with the pub being so close to the cemetery, it gets a handful of guests that aren't on the same plane as us. One of the pub's most well-known customers is regarded very fondly by the living regulars. The spirit takes the form of an older gentleman in vintage tweed and has been known to appear in the corner of the bar, quietly enjoying a Guinness until he finishes his pint and vanishes from sight. The staff actually encourage those who see him to buy him a pint for the road. In my opinion, they're just trying to take your cash. Coming in at number 3, the Jervis Ghosts. Jervis Street, located in the middle of Dublin city centre, has served as the backdrop for many encounters with the unknown and the world of the dead through their eyes, proving that ghosts can be seen and felt almost anywhere, even on populated high streets. The Jervis Shopping Centre opened back in 1996 and is currently home to over 70 retailers, and surprisingly is a popular destination for many ghost hunters out there. Some history for you. Not everyone may know this, but the shopping centre was actually built on the ground of Jervis Street Hospital, which closed in the 1980s after attending the needs of the sick and dying for almost 300 years. Many of course credit the creepy goings on in Jervis Street area to the restless spirits who died in its wards. In 2008, a newsreader from the radio station Today FM was apparently walking along the busy street outside Jervis Shopping Centre only to be stopped in their tracks by a female voice singing a lullaby close by. Creepy. The newsreader assumed they were hearing things and continued to walk with the lullaby fading out. However, it quickly became louder again as she moved further away. The moment lingered with her to the point that she mentioned it on her talk show, and within minutes the lines were flooded with callers citing similar occurrences. Many workers from the shopping centre claimed to have seen the figure of a woman in an old nurse's uniform wandering between the stores, while others told of fruit being tossed through the air by seemingly no one. One person, while approaching the centre's bathrooms, was eyed by a woman who whispered at them before vanishing into thin air, and several others mentioned having met similar spirits not far from the centre. Sure, that makes sense.
Coming in at number 3, we've got the Nennerlook. We've talked about urban legends from the far west coast and the most populous city, so now let's take a trip out east. Known for its quaint, peaceful charm, Newfoundland is the last place you'd expect to find terrifying urban legends, right? I mean, you can get screeched in and end up with a scary hangover and only a faint memory of your previous night, but that's something else entirely. The monster seen near Newfoundland dwells in the sea, but does so unconventionally. How do you think sea monsters usually get around? By swimming, right? Well, this thing acts a little differently than most. First sighted by Sir Humphrey Gilbert back in the 16th century, it was described as a lion-like creature. This fits the description of an Inuit cryptid known as the Nennerlook. Legends of such a creature have been passed down through generations of people, but it was considered just a legend to outsiders until Sir Humphrey Gilbert came across it himself. The Nennerlook is a gigantic beast estimated to be as tall as an iceberg. It's got white fur, huge ears, and loves to eat anything that gets close enough. Seals are the classic meal, but it won't turn down a human if they get close. Now, back to that bit about movement. The Nennerlook doesn't swim, it walks along the bottom of the ocean. Yep, not the most efficient way to get around, but it gets the job done. Imagine watching a gigantic beast just walk out of the sea towards you. This is also the reason why people say that it's not really ever seen away from shore. It makes sense considering how deep the ocean is. But if you ever spot a little antenna poking out of the water, it's time to get a move on. And if you ever hear a deafening roar, it's probably too late. Coming in at number 2, we've got the Cabbagetown Tunnel Monster. We'll return to Toronto for a moment, you know, because of the urban qualities of these legends. Get it? Well, every tunnel system has its fair share of legends, and the Cabbagetown Tunnel is no exception. I'm surprised nobody's gone back and tried to get footage of this strange creature. Back in the 70s, a kitten ran away from home. While searching for his lost feline, a man came across a tunnel in Cabbagetown. Thinking that the kitten might have run in here to hide, he descended down into the abyss. Scanning the darkness for any sign of the little animal, he noticed some motion off to the side. Thinking it might be what he was looking for, the man pointed his flashlight at the movement and saw something he was definitely not expecting, neither cute nor cuddly. He claims to have seen a monkey-like creature with glowing orange eyes standing at half the height of a man covered in gray fur. If that horrible sight wasn't enough, listen to this. The man froze up and kept his light trained on the monster. The monster didn't like this much and told the man in an awful, trembling voice, "Go away. Go away." And guess what the man did next? He hightailed it out of there and didn't look back. This story made its way around for a while, but nobody ever properly looked into it. That is, until a year later. The man's friend had convinced him to share his story, so he went to the Toronto Sun with the scoop. A reporter accompanied him back to the tunnel, and they both scoured the inside. Looking around, they didn't find any evidence of a monster, but they did discover the remains of a cat. Some speculate that the tunnel leads to a point in the Toronto sewer system, and others have different ideas. Either way, nobody has seen the Cabbagetown sewer monster since. Would you go looking? Finally, at number 1, we've got the ghost ship of Northumberland Strait. Heading back east for a moment, let's consider the Northumberland Strait. This is a body of water that separates Prince Edward Island from Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. It's said that there is a ghost ship that sails upon the strait, more often than not totally engulfed in flame. The legend dates back over 200 years and always seems to play out the same way. Folks on land will look out to see a beautiful schooner with pure white sails. As they look on, these sails will catch fire and the whole ship starts burning. Often people will head out on rescue missions only to find that there was never a ship to begin with. Legend says that the ship will only appear before a northeast wind, predicting a storm. So where does this ghost ship come from, and why does it always come back? Well, some people believe that the ship was captained by a pirate who made a deal with the devil. The ship had been fired upon and was burning fast. He wanted his treasure hidden and protected, so he signed the pact and sealed his fate. Now he and his crew are doomed to sail forever on this perpetually burning ship. Yikes. Now, skeptics will tell you that the ghost ship is simply a mirage, but if that were the case, then how do they explain the flames? How very Canadian, eh? I'm glad my homeland has some legends that can stack up against the big ones from other nations. There are plenty more where that came from too. Any real Canadian remembers reading all sorts of real Canadian ghost story books after scholastic fairs.
Jumping on in at number 5, we have the story of Gabriel. In Ethiopia, sometime in the 1960s, a young boy by the name of Gabriel was playing in his backyard with a friend. They were running around when Gabriel just kind of disappeared out of thin air. Traumatized, his friend alerted Gabriel's parents, and soon enough the whole town was on lockdown. No one could explain what happened, and it remained a complete mystery. That is, until 6 months later when Gabriel rematerialized in a busy market square. Just like that, he was back. Witnesses couldn't begin to explain what they'd just seen. If that's not weird enough, the story that Gabriel later told would leave everyone baffled. He said that seconds after he was playing in the backyard, he was suddenly in a place he didn't recognize. Gabriel was led into a glowing, windowless white room by a strange humanoid creature. Inside that room were other abducted children, seemingly from different parts of planet Earth. He said that some of the children had been there for months, but his grasp of time was a little bit off. His captors later led him to a large city-like area with no sky, surrounded by supernatural skyscrapers. He reported seeing flying vehicles that resembled cars, and other humans were walking with creatures that he didn't recognize along streets that almost shone. Gabriel reported that the whole experience lasted a couple of hours, but when he was transported back, he had no idea that 6 months had just passed. Remember kids, never go off with strangers. Next up at number 4, we have the story of Travis Walton. Now, this one is pretty damn weird, so just stick with it. The case begins in November 1975 at the Apache Sitgreaves National Forest near Phoenix, Arizona. Travis Walton was a forestry worker, and along with 6 colleagues, they were on a tree thinning project out in the woods. The 7 of them reported at first seeing mysterious lights, which then materialized into some sort of flying saucer up in the canopy. Mesmerized, Walton was the only one to get out of the vehicle and approach the craft, despite his friends yelling at him to get back. Suddenly, Travis was hit by what he refers to as an energy beam, and he was blasted back over 20 feet. He disappeared over the trees while his colleagues were still trying to figure out what the hell had just happened. Originally, police thought that this whole thing was an elaborate cover-up by his colleagues, and in reality, they'd murdered him and disposed of the body. But everyone lost their minds when Travis turned up 5 days later, claiming that he'd been abducted by aliens and that he'd had to fight his way out. Travis claimed that 3 humanoid beings held him captive. They were grey, smooth-skinned, and blemishless. Later, all 7 of the group passed lie detector tests, adding credibility to this bizarre ordeal. Coming in at number 3, we have the Valentich disappearance. Now, this story is pretty compelling, and whatever the truth really is, some downright weird stuff went on here. At 7:12 p.m. on the 21st of October 1978, one of the most unexplainable UFO sightings in modern history occurred over the Bass Strait in Australia. Born on the 9th of June 1958 in Melbourne, Frederick Valentich was a 20-year-old shop assistant with a passion for aviation. During his 127-mile flight, Fred intended to fly out to King Island, but during his journey, he ran into something a little bit strange. Fred advised Melbourne Air Traffic Control that he was being accompanied by an aircraft that was about 300 meters above him. Air traffic replied that there was no known traffic at that level. He described the vessel as being long and having some unusual features, illuminated by 4 bright landing lights, and was acting in a very strange way. Visibility was good and winds were light, so Fred quickly ruled out the possibility of an optic illusion. The craft passed him regularly at high speeds before switching up direction and altitude. Frederick claimed that the aircraft was orbiting above him, and after 28 seconds of radio silence, he reported that the vessel had just vanished. But moments later, after telling air traffic he was proceeding to King Island, Frederick notified the operator that the aircraft was back. And in his words, it's hovering and it's not an aircraft. This was followed by 17 seconds of a strange, unidentified noise, described as being metallic, scraping sounds. Then all contact was lost. Frederick Valentich's body was never found, and neither was his aircraft. Bringing it in at number 2, we have the Aurora, Texas crash. You're not going to believe this one, but seriously, I'm pretty sure this is legit aliens. In 1897, that's right, 1897, 6 years before the Wright brothers' first flight, numerous sightings of a strange cigar-shaped airship were reported all across the United States. And the small town of Aurora, Texas would quickly become one of the most infamous UFO hotbeds in the world. On April 17th, locals ran out of their houses to the sight of a mysterious object in the sky, and they soon realized that it was about to crash. Slowing down to a speed of 10 or 12 miles, the aircraft gradually settled itself toward the ground, sailing directly over the busy public square and crashing into a windmill in the northern part of the town, which was owned by the town's lawmaker, Judge Proctor. The residents soon rushed over to the crash site where they found strange burning machinery and the pilot who had not survived the crash. Locals reported that the pilot was not of this world, and in newspaper reports they referred to it as a Martian in 1897. There were also a stack of papers found on the body, written in an unknown form of hieroglyphics which couldn't be deciphered. Strangely enough, the townsfolk buried the pilot in the nearby Aurora Cemetery. Yeah, let's stop there. The body is allegedly still somewhere in the local cemetery, buried in an unmarked grave. The cemetery even contains a historical commission marker that mentions the incident. There you have it. There's an alien buried somewhere in Aurora, Texas. And finally, at our number 1 top spot, we have the Roswell incident. No alien list would be complete without the most infamous and near enough credible UFO landing in history. In July 1947, a strange airborne object crashed on a ranch in Roswell, New Mexico. The big kicker to this story, though, is how the US military reacted to the events that would later unfold. On July 8th, an Air Force public information officer named Walter Holt issued a press release stating that officials had recovered a flying disc from the Roswell crash site. Later that day, the Air Force changed their story, claiming that the flying disc was actually in fact a weather balloon. Seems a little bit fishy, right? The incident faded into obscurity for over 30 years, but in 1978, dozens of officials poured forward claiming that the whole Roswell incident was a complete cover-up, and that as many as 11 alleged crash sites had been part of a large-scale military operation to contain the truth. In 1989, a former mortician named Glenn Dennis put forward a detailed personal account where he claimed that he'd witnessed multiple alien autopsies carried out at the Roswell base. What this gave birth to was an astronomical rise in UFO popularity, with thousands of people pouring in across the globe with similar stories and experiences. What do you guys think? Have you ever experienced an unexplainable alien incident? Do you believe that we're not alone in the universe? As the old saying goes, the truth is out there.
And at number 5, we've got Ogopogo. Let's start with a famous one. Move over Nessie, we've got a Canadian sea cryptid to discuss. If you've ever been to British Columbia, you'll know that there are plenty of mountains and lakes to explore. One of the more well-known ones, both for its picturesque qualities and supposed housing of a monster, is Lake Okanagan. Situated in Kelowna, this lake is famous for its vacation-friendly beaches. But if you head out looking for a relaxing day on the water, you might meet up with a strange beast. Sightings of the Ogopogo date back to 1972, but indigenous legends have been telling tales of the creature for much longer. It's described as a long, slender creature with many humps and a horse head that peeks out of the lake during thunderstorms. Sound familiar? While not nearly as famous, Ogopogo is quite similar to Nessie when you get down to it. Both are aquatic, hard to find, and attract all sorts of cryptid hunters. All sorts of folks have claimed to see Ogopogo swimming around, popping its head out of the water from time to time. Photos and videos are common, but none are really verifiable or convincing. Thankfully, the creature seems to be relatively friendly. For all these sightings and rumors, there haven't been too many claims of violence or aggression from the lake-dwelling beast. In fact, it's actually quite well liked by everyone. In the 90s, the Canadian government commissioned a postage stamp in honor of Ogopogo. Way to go. Skeptics all have their explanations for what it might actually be, with one prevalent idea claiming that it's actually a primitive whale that only comes out during calmer seasons. Regardless of whether it's real or not, what's more fun to say in the end, Nessie or Ogopogo? I'll let you guys decide. Coming in at number 4, we've got the University of Toronto Phantom Worker. If a film is being shot in Toronto, you're more than likely going to catch a glimpse of U of T's campus. The school's buildings are ornate and beautiful, perfect for giving a scholarly feel to any scene. A lot of the buildings have facades that date back to the early 19th century, giving them a timeless feel. Of course, with any buildings that have been around so long, there will be ghost stories. Back in the 1920s, U of T built a Gothic memorial to honor students who had died during the First World War. During construction of this elaborate memorial, many workers were hired to help out. Legend says that one of the workers fell from the tower while polishing the bells, a true Hunchback of Notre Dame moment. Ever since that fateful incident, students and faculty alike have claimed to see the ghost of the worker wandering around campus. Some even claim that there have been ghostly apparitions falling from the tower. Folks who don't know the legend will run to see if the poor fellow is okay, but never find a body. So much for being a good Samaritan. There are many other ghost stories surrounding the university as well, but none so stomach-dropping. Stonemasons with murderous qualities, little girls lost in planetariums, and a baker who managed to trap his mistress inside a secret room. The stories are real, but are the ghosts still haunting the campus? I suppose you'll have to pay the institution a visit and find out. Just try not to get roped into paying tuition, alright? That's scarier than any ghost story.
Coming in at 3, New Jersey, The Watcher. Now, this legend could honestly be the script for a horror movie. Let me break it down for you. A family begin receiving ominous notes just days after they close on their dream home. Yeah, spooky, right? Well, this story took off back in 2015 after a young family moved into a $1 million house in Westfield, New Jersey. However, they began to get letters signed by someone only IDing themselves as the Watcher, who claimed it was their duty to watch over the house, while also spouting weird lines such as, I quote, "Do you need to fill the house with the young blood I requested?" and "Who has the bedrooms facing the street?" Yeah, creepy. The writer also noted the make of the couple's car and the comings and goings of construction crews. He also observed that the couple had 3 young children, stating, I quote, "Was your old house too small for the growing family, or was it greed to bring me your children? Once I know their names, I will call to them and draw them to me." Now, no one quite knows the truth behind the legend, whether it was a prank or a spooky neighbor, but what we do know is that the Watcher was never caught and still remains watching the house in Westfield, New Jersey. Coming in at number 2, California Turnbull Canyon. Turnbull Canyon is a 4-mile loop trail located near Whittier, California, and is part of Puente Hills Preserve. It lies in the northern central part of the preserve and is an east-west canyon with relatively steep drainage. Now natives call Turnbull Canyon Hatunga, or the place of the devil, and is supposedly where the ghosts of those slain for not converting to Christianity dwell alongside witches and Satanists who reportedly used the place to sacrifice children, whose spirits now walk along the canyon. According to other reports, Turnbull Canyon also houses the ghosts of 21 children who perished in a plane crash back in 1952. However, there are no existing records of the incident, so this may be local legend. However, what we do know is real is that in the canyon lies the remains of an old insane asylum that supposedly came back to life to kill a teen in the 1960s via long dormant electrical wire. Not only that, but there are cults, alien encounters, and gravity hills. The list goes on and on. Basically, if something unnerves you, there is probably a story about it going down at Turnbull Canyon. Now, its origin is pretty simple. Turnbull's evil dates back centuries. However, it wasn't until the site was established as a fur trapping site in 1845 that things started to get a little odd, and very quickly word of the canyon's evil terror spread far and wide, making it one of the world's most visited places, but not for its beauty, but due to morbid curiosity. And finally, coming in at number 1, Virginia, the Bunny Man Bridge. This terrifying urban legend originated from 2 incidents in Fairfax County, Virginia in 1970, but very quickly spread through the Washington, D.C. area as well. Now, like all legends, there are many variations. Most involve a man wearing a rabbit costume who attacks people with an axe or a hatchet. Now, the legend goes that in 1904, a group of convicts were piled onto a bus to be transported from an asylum in Clifton, Virginia to a nearby prison. En route, however, one of the buses crashed and the convicts managed to escape. Thankfully though, the police were able to round up all of them, all but one. As their search went on, they began to find skinned, half-eaten bunnies in the woods and hanging from the overpass of Fairfax Bridge, now known as the Bunny Man Bridge. A year later, on Halloween night, several teens went to hang out under the bridge. Come morning, they were all found dead. Legend has it that if you hang out under the bridge on Halloween night, you will meet the same fate as the rabbits and the teenagers. Jump ahead to 1970, there were numerous police reports of people who had been threatened by a man holding an axe and wearing a white suit with bunny ears. Terrifying. A few other people also reported that the man in the suit threw an axe at them for trespassing near the bridge. To this day, there have been numerous reportings of the man with the axe, as well as the dead rabbits in the woods surrounding Fairfax Bridge, which is now known, once again, as the Bunny Man Bridge. Now, versions of the legend have varied over the years, particularly in the Bunny Man's name, motives, weapons, victims, and description, with some accounts stating that victims were mutilated and others that the Bunny Man is a ghost. However, that aside, the legend is absolutely horrifying and has prevented a lot of Virginia locals from wandering too close to the bridge.
Worden. American test pilot, engineer, and NASA astronaut Alfred Merrill Worden was the module pilot for the Apollo 15 lunar mission in 1971. One of the 24 people who have flown to the moon. Woohoo! He's got a couple of firsts though. He orbited it 74 times in the command module. He was the first to drive a moon car. After Apollo 15 reached lunar orbit and his crewmates departed, and Worden spent 3 days alone in his module. That's terrifying. Traveling the furthest out from any other human. After he returned, the crew and him became involved in a NASA controversy, however. Not over leaked alien info, but over postage stamps they had taken to the moon. Yeah, big no-no apparently. They were reprimanded by NASA and did not fly in space again. Worden remained at NASA until 1975, then entered a private sector. And then it gets weird. On a British television morning show, Al Worden started talking about some interesting stuff. They asked him, "Why should we keep going back to the moon?" He paused and replied, "Survival. Survival of our species." Worden also rejected the notion that humans could colonize planets within our solar system, calling them unsustainable. Then he claims he knows where to find habitable planets. When pressed on aliens if he believes them or not, he said, "Yes. You know, I've been asked that question hundreds of times. Yeah, we are the aliens though. We just think there's somebody else. But we were the ones who came from somewhere else because somebody else had to survive. They got in their little spaceship and they came here and they landed and they started civilization here. And if you don't believe me, go get books on the ancient Sumerians and see what they have to say about it. They'll tell you right up front." End quote. Okay, when you hear an astronaut say that, kinda jarring. Number 4, Roswell. As always, if you dig what we do here on Top 5 Scary, make sure you hit that like button. Birth of the UAP phenomenon. 1945, the US's first nuclear explosion. 1946, first underwater nuclear explosion. 1947, the first crash flying saucer. Coincidence? I think not. Especially since they've been known to hover around nuclear bases. Probably for the better. Humans are kind of the worst. Local rancher Mac Brazel finds the wreckage on his property in Lincoln County, New Mexico. Sheriff Wilcox shows RAAF's commanding officer Colonel Blanchard the materials, and during the night, the Air Force combs the entirety of the property, apparently harboring 2 small injured alien bodies. Taking them, of course, to Kirtland Air Force Base, New Mexico that night. And the very next morning, the Roswell Air Force makes a statement claiming they have recovered a crashed flying disc in local newspapers. Boom! History, baby! Photographs of Jesse Marcel, the head intelligence officer who investigated and recovered some of the debris. The very next day, the Army retracts their statement and all of a sudden, a high-altitude weather balloon. Can you believe that, huh? AKA the birth of a conspiracy theory. Nuclear fission explosions, weather balloons. Something's not adding up here. Number 3, Edgar Mitchell. Edgar Dean Mitchell was a U.S. Navy officer, aviator, test pilot, engineer, NASA astronaut, and of course, a ufologist. Ufology is the pseudo term for somebody who studies the UFO phenomenon. I don't think there's a degree you can get that in. If so, I'm signing up. What school? Sorry? He was the lunar module pilot of the Apollo 14 in 1971 and spent 9 hours working on the lunar surface. He was the 6th person to walk on the moon. Yeah, he was walking while Worden was up there drifting in the currents of space. Mitchell publicly expressed his opinions and that he was sure that there were thousands of UFOs recorded since the early 1940s belonging to other planets. Thousands. Dateline NBC conducted an interview with Mitchell in 1996. He talked about meeting with officials from 3 different countries who claimed that they had met extraterrestrials in person. Quote, "The evidence for alien contact was very strong and classified by governments, who were covering up visitations and existence of alien bodies in places such as Roswell, New Mexico." Mitchell's book, The Way of the Explorer, discusses his journey. In 2004, he told the St. Petersburg Times that the US government was studying alien bodies and that this group had specifically stopped briefing US presidents since the 1960s. He said, quote, "We all know that UFOs are real. Now, the question is, where do they come from?" In 2008, Mitchell then was interviewed and claimed that Roswell crash was in fact the aliens that had contacted humans several times, but that the government had hidden the truth for more than 60 years. Scary stuff, scary stuff. He sadly passed in 2016. If we just reread the credentials alone, just one more time.
Coming in at 3, the Changeling. A changeling is a creature found in folklore throughout Europe, specifically Germany, and is believed to be a fairy child that had been left in place of a human child stolen by the fairies. It's a common theme stemming all the way back to medieval literature and reflects concern over infants thought to be afflicted with diseases or disorders. So this specific legend goes that once upon a time, at Heslock near Odenheim, a servant and a cook of a clergyman were married and living together. together. However, their newborn baby would not grow or gain weight. The mother was told to visit Neuhausen and give her baby water from the Syriac spring, with many believing that a visit to the spring would either restore a child back to health or would kill it within 9 days. En route to the spring, the child became heavy and monstrous in her arms, which resulted in a passing traveller yelling to the wife that she had the devil on her back. I quote, "Your child is at home in a new cradle behind the chest in the side room. Throw this monster into the brook." The mother cried but did as she was told. She threw the creature into the brook and a great howl bellowed from beneath the bridge. She fled home where she found her baby, healthy and laughing in its brand new cradle. Coming at 2, the Children's Crusade. According to history, the Children's Crusade was a failed crusade by European Christians to regain the Holy Land from the Muslims, said to have taken place in 1212. Now the story has become blurred over the years from factual to more mythical, with some versions including the visions by a French boy and a German boy, an intention to peacefully convert Muslims in the Holy Land to Christianity, with bands of children marching to Italy, and some being sold into slavery. Yeah, it's rough. In this specific German legend though, the story tells of a misguided German boy who was visited by Jesus, who told him to go forth and convert Muslims. So following the orders of Christ, he gathered a sizable group, mostly children, and led them towards the Mediterranean, where they took boats east. Now during their journey, one boat crashed, killing everyone on board. The others, however, arrived in Tunisia, where the children were sold into slavery, and in turn, none of them made it to their destination. Sad. I would have rather been on the boat. And finally, coming in at number 1, the Werewolf of Morbach. This legend goes that the Rhineland town of Wittlich is the last place in Germany where a werewolf had been killed. Thomas Johannes Baptist Schweister, what a name that is, was a supposed deserter from Napoleon's army and fled to his homeland in France. While passing through Wittlich, him and his hungry soldiers who fled with him located a farmhouse which they pillaged. However, in the process they were discovered by a farmer who they promptly killed along with his sons. The farmer's wife witnessed the deed and cursed Thomas, screaming, "From now on at each full moon you will change into a rabid wolf." So what did Thomas do? He crushed her skull. Of course. Anyway, as time went on, the curse began to take effect and Thomas's personality changed. He began to rob, rape and pillage until he eventually fled to the sanctuary of the deep forest, where he took on his wolf form. He began to slaughter livestock and animals in his new form before a group of villagers discovered him, killed him near the village of Morbach, and buried him. They lit a candle that would burn continually. As long as the candle is lit, the werewolf could never return.
Kicking us off at number 10, we have the O'Hare International Airport. In November 2006, things started to get a little bit unexplainable for staff at Chicago's O'Hare International Airport. Just as Flight 466 was getting ready to take off for their scheduled flight between Chicago and North Carolina, a United Airlines employee on the tarmac noticed a strange object hovering above gate C-17. As they peered closer, they realized that the object was some sort of vessel, dark grey and metallic in appearance. From 4:15 p.m, during the 5 minutes that the craft was visible, a total of 12 United employees, as well as a few witnesses from outside the airport, witnessed the saucer-shaped object in flight. Shortly afterwards, witnesses claimed that the craft shot upward, breaking a hole in the clouds, enough so that the United flight staff could see the blue sky through it. The story was quickly picked up by the Chicago Tribune and later made international news. Strangely though, because the UFO wasn't picked up by the airport's radar, the airport officials refused to investigate, claiming that it was merely a weather phenomenon. Next up at number 9, we have the Stephenville sightings. In 2008, the small town of Stephenville, Texas, got a bit of a strange surprise during one particular pleasant evening in January. Mostly known for its dairy farms, Stephenville is located 100 miles southwest of Dallas, and for the most part is a pretty regular town. But on January 8th, dozens of its citizens reported a series of strange white lights above Highway 67. At first, they traveled in a single horizontal arc and then switched to a series of vertical parallel lines. A local pilot, Stephen Allen, reported that the lights spanned about a mile long and half a mile wide. He also estimated that they were traveling about 3,000 miles an hour. Just as a benchmark, the average airliner travels at around 575 miles an hour. On top of this, no sound was reported by any of the townspeople. Weeks later, after the story caught some traction, the US Air Force explained that they were flying F-16s in the area. The townspeople, they didn't buy it. Why? Because F-16s can't fly anywhere close to the speeds that the lights were sighted at. So, who knows? Bringing it in at number 8, we have the USS Nimitz encounter. For 2 weeks, the USS Princeton was on a routine assignment, tracking reported objects that would appear at 80,000 feet and then plummet to hover above the Pacific Ocean. What's that, they asked. By November 14th, 2014, the ship had noted an object that appeared 100 miles off the coast of San Diego. After another nearby naval vessel, the USS Nimitz, had dispatched 2 fighter jets to the location, what they first saw appeared to be churning, boiling water in an oval shape underneath the surface. Then, suddenly and out of nowhere, the pilots reported a white tic-tac-like object that appeared above the water. The strange vessel had no visible markings that would indicate an engine, wings, or even a window. The 2 pilots, Commander David Fravor and Lieutenant Commander Jim Slate, attempted to intercept the craft, but it quickly accelerated away and disappeared. Later, it reappeared on radar 60 miles away. The UFO moved at 3 times the speed of sound and twice the speed of the fighter jets. Scary stuff. Next up at number 7, we have the story of William Bosak. William Bosak was a dairy farmer, they always are, from Polk County, Wisconsin, and on December 2nd, 1974 at 10:30 p.m. he stumbled across something that made him question his belief in aliens. Bosak was traveling from a local cooperative when he saw something on the side of the road on the way back to his farm. It was a tall object that was around 3 meters high and had a dull surface which didn't shine, but strangely reflected the car's headlights. On top of the object was a transparent section which had a creature in it with its hands raised in the air. Bosak reported that the creature was similar to a human being, but its head was covered in hard, short hair with large, bulging eyes and larger ears that resembled a calf's. Its body was covered in a thick brown wool, and it had a terrified facial expression as if it feared for its own life. Bosak couldn't explain what he saw, but as later paranormal reporters found, the town locals considered him to be an honest, truthful man and a general skeptic of UFOs. Since then though, he's changed his tune and has even stood up to a lie detector test to confirm his claims. Coming in at number 6, we have paranormal hitchhikers. Strange orbs are a pretty common occurrence in UFO sightings, but this one kind of takes it to a new level. In 2011, an unnamed security officer was driving home on a South Dakota highway. Suddenly, hundreds of opaque red lights began to appear around his vehicle and circled the moving car like a strange alien halo. The driver reported to police that he was still doing 60 miles an hour, but suddenly the car rapidly began to decelerate with absolutely no explanation. And then the lights, well, they just vanished. The driver later told police that as he was readjusting to what had happened, he noticed the lights re-emerge at the side of the road. It strangely began to assemble itself into some sort of glowing life form, and then without pause, it was on the bonnet of the car. He reported that it had long, translucent fingers that stretched through the roof of his car. The creature then ran its fingers down his back, which left a searing, burning pain. However, the officer also reported that he felt as if the creature was trying to communicate with him. As soon as the driver saw headlights in the distance, the creature reportedly dematerialized and disappeared, but the driver was left with some pretty terrifying memories.
Strange things in the skies. Now, I know I talked about this in a previous video, and if you're a really good Top 5 Scary fan, maybe you'll recognize some of these. But since I aired that last video, way more weird stuff has happened, so it only seems fitting that we'd run through it once again. Starting on February 10th, yours truly's birthday by the way, there was a pattern of incredibly bizarre happenings in the skies, and some very, very dodgy answers from government officials who refused to confirm or deny anything, which always seems more suspicious than less. So here's a quick Cole's Notes play-by-play of the last few weeks. On February 10th, US fighter jets brought down a still unidentified object over the coast of Alaska. Now, this object has not been confirmed what it is at all or identified, but it's been confirmed as not being a balloon. Okay, that's one thing, only 1 million left to go. One official referred to it as being the size of a small car, which is definitely beyond strange. You think you would see that flying around? This single event would probably be enough to set tinfoil hats on fire and keep me in business for the next few years making videos about conspiracies, but the literal next day on February 11th, a UFO was shot down over Canada, around the Yukon. That's the big territory up on the left, right by Alaska. A US fighter jet downed this one, and it was described as being smaller than the first and cylindrical in nature, which is gonna come up a few times before this video is done, so hold on to that thought, there's still more. February 12th, we had something bizarre shot down over Lake Huron. An object that first appeared over Montana reappeared on Sunday before being shot down with an octagonal structure and strings hanging off of it, but it wasn't carrying anything, which is bizarre. And then over Billings, Montana, there was something very bizarre that was seen falling from the sky, leaving a thick orange chemtrail, and residents were left in the dark about it. Local residents wondered just what it was, and some Redditors in a group noticed around the area that there had been an increased military presence since the sighting. So just what is going on around here, there, and just about everywhere? But if you can't wait at all, and you just want to watch alien videos all day, I agree with you. That's what I do every single day, and it's a great way to live. We've got loads of alien and UFO vids, NASA conspiracies, all the things they don't want you to know. And if that ain't your jam, we got scary stories, horror movies, monsters, cryptids, true crime, just about everything spooky under the sun and above it. So stay subscribed to Top 5 Scary, but most importantly, stay scared. And keep watching this video, because I got way more weird stuff coming up for you. Number 4, the Tom DeLonge sighting. If you're a UFO enthusiast, then you know that one of the leading names in UFO research and discovery right now is Tom DeLonge, the nasally voiced frontman for pop punk project Blink-182. And if you didn't know that, now you do. Although I suspect most of the people who watch our videos don't know that band. Anyway, little trivia for you. That's what he does when he's not selling out $300 concerts. He hunts aliens, and he's pretty good at it. If some of the footage he gathers is anything to go by, why don't you take a look at this weird footage he shared on his Instagram a couple days ago. It's gonna go right there. Pretty darn weird, huh? If that isn't one of the most clear, close encounters I've ever seen, I'm not sure what is. You can practically trace the outline of the flying saucer. It looks like the platonic flying saucer, like the one we all imagine when we close our eyes. I can almost see the little green man inside. On his Instagram, DeLonge wrote this caption: "Enjoy. They are real." To the Stars Media will be turning real events like these into major feature films and television series to bring the facts to the world. Note the whirling sound from the propulsion. Now, To the Stars is the fringe research company owned by Tom DeLonge, hoping to spread information and explore the possibility of UFOs and UAPs, and it does also sound like it's a plan to get Tom DeLonge some more money by making a cinematic alien universe. Whatever his endgame is though, can't deny the footage posted here is eerily compelling. Number 3, Gary McKinnon. Now, I've talked a bit about Gary McKinnon before on this channel because I am obsessed with this story. He's a notorious hacker who broke into NASA's security. His story is a cool one. I love anytime you hear someone pulling a fast one over a government agency like this, so it bears repeating. He's a genius computer hacker with a lot of spare time and wanted to know just what the Yanks were hiding from his home in Scotland. He wanted to go after NASA's data server to see if they had anything hidden they'd never told anybody about. Been called the biggest military hack of all time, so I'd wager maybe he found something. Why risk your life, career, freedom on this exactly? McKinnon claims he had received an insider tip that the US had reverse engineered technology from UFOs, free energy. In his own words, he said, "This should not be kept hidden from the public when pensioners can't even pay their fuel bills. And it's just like a bonus if you get some alien stuff on the side." So what did he find? McKinnon claims in his searching he saw images of aircraft that did not resemble any he had ever seen in his life. One in particular he describes as looking like a massive cigar-shaped craft floating over the northern hemisphere that did not look man-made. He said he was in shock looking at the image and didn't think to take a photo. Well, there's those cylindrical shaped crafts again. I told you to keep thinking about them, and keep thinking about them again because they're going to show up one more time before this video is done. Well, that wasn't the only exciting thing he found. He also found something called the Disclosure Project, a 400-page document outlining testimonials from government agents across multiple branches of service recording sightings of unidentified objects, but that wasn't even the meal ticket. The real jewel was a document of a non-terrestrial officer's sheet, a spreadsheet listing the name of NASA agents to be transferred to new ships or serve on board space stations, but McKinnon noted that none of the names of the vessels existed in any database. Now, I don't know how much you know about the US government, but they absolutely love it when you poke holes in their important security, triply so if you do it from the comfort of your bedroom in a country away. The US tried their level best to extradite McKinnon, but were prevented by the Crown from serving out a 70-year sentence. McKinnon's doing well. He recently took to the UFO subreddit to answer questions from fans and true believers. There wasn't a whole lot of new information, but it's just nice to know he hasn't been shoved into a black van somewhere.
Coming in at 2, Nokken. Nokken is the Norwegian name for a specific type of water spirit, also known as the Nak or the Nika. The Nokken are supposedly able to shapeshift, but are more commonly known as male water spirits who lure women and children to their deaths, usually using their enchanted violin. This most commonly occurs at Christmas or on Midsummer's Eve, with the Nokken targeting pregnant women or children that had yet to be baptized. Now, it's not easy to describe the appearance of the Nokken due to its tendency to shapeshift. However, reports have stated that he is a rather elegant man, oftentimes lurking inside the waterfall. Seems to be where all the hot men are lurking these days. However, sometimes he has been depicted as a brook horse. Be warned, the Nokken will become unhappy if he does not have access to water, with tales emerging of one spirit who went to live with a human after they had fallen in love, but was unable to stay due to their deep yearning to be by the water. So if you ever find yourself lured in by the Nokken, just drain that waterfall and run away. Easy enough, right? However, don't fret too much, with most crediting this legend as a manifestation of the dangers associated with water. And finally, coming in at number 1, trolls. I mean, of course, trolls are the primary legend in all of Scandinavian mythology and folklore. Old Norse history describes trolls as beings that dwell in isolated rocks, mountains, or caves and lives together in small family units that are rarely useful to human beings. Now, trolls are said to be inspired by the cruel giants who were the primary enemies of the gods who lived in the mountains of Utgard. They are said to have human-like appearance, but they are incredibly big and ugly. No shame, just facts. Now, like all legends, it varies from source to source, with some trolls being dim-witted, some have no particular grotesque characteristics, to others being dangerous to human beings. Now, although some are described as being man-eaters and as turning to stone upon contact with the sun, trolls are also attested as being solitary beings living far away from civilization. Upon the arrival of Christianity around the 1300s, the stories began to change, with stories emerging of the trolls being able to smell the blood of a Christian man, with them basically representing anything of the old times, which the new religion condemned. At number 5, we have Jim Morrison. Born James Douglas Morrison, he was a singer, songwriter and poet who served as the lead vocalist of the rock band The Doors. However, Morrison developed an alcohol dependency during the 60s, with him passing away unexpectedly at the age of 27 in Paris. As no autopsy was performed, the cause of his death remains unknown. He was ultimately laid to rest in the famous Père Lachaise cemetery. Over the years, his headstones were defaced or stolen until Morrison's own father placed a rather ordinary looking one on the site with an inscription in Greek, which reads, "Against his own demon." However, in 1997, journalist Brett Meisner was visiting the cemetery when he had this photo taken of him, standing in front of Jim Morrison's headstone. However, in the background of the picture, standing in the doorway of a crypt, you can clearly see a semi-transparent figure, arms held wide, which resembles the late singer. Many state that the pose is very reminiscent of a famous photo taken of Morrison. What do you guys think though? Ghost or trick of the light? Whatever you think, it's been enough to drive more tourists to the cemetery to attempt to catch a glimpse of the famous singer. In at number 4, we have Sweeney Todd. Now, hear me out before we begin. Yes, I know that Sweeney Todd is said to hail from Victorian London, however this legend states that maybe he didn't, and maybe he walked the streets of France. First and foremost though, Sweeney Todd is a fictional character who appeared as the villain of the Victorian petty dreadful serial The String of Pearls. The tale became a staple of Victorian melodrama and London urban legend. A barber from Fleet Street, Sweeney Todd murders his customers with a straight razor and turns their bodies over to Mrs. Lovett, his partner in crime, who bakes their flesh into meat pies. However, could it be that the original Sweeney Todd was not from London, but instead hailed from medieval Paris? Legend states that Paris had its very own demon barber during the 14th century, and was perhaps the first home to the cannibalistic pastries from the murderous barber. During this time, the Rue de Marmousets was known far and wide for its succulent French delicacies, especially for those made by a butcher next door to a barbershop on the corner. The pies and pastries were said to be so tasty that even King Charles VI was said to have been a fan. From 1384 to 1387, the butcher was said to have been in cahoots with his neighbouring barber, with it being said that the pastries were so scrumptious thanks to the young flesh of the victims of the demon barber. The partnership was said to have thrived for 3 years and would have continued if their gory deeds weren't discovered. It was said that an abandoned dog was what gave them away, who was barking outside the door of the barber's. The police conducted a search and discovered heaps of humans' bones and flesh in the shed underbelly of the two shops. For their crimes, the barber and the butcher were burned alive, along with their shops, in order to exorcise the area from their evil. Coming in at number 3, the catacombs. The catacombs of Paris are underground ossuaries which hold the remains of more than 6 million people in a small part of a tunnel network built to consolidate Paris' ancient stone quarries. Now, it was largely forgotten until it became a novelty place for concerts and various other private events in the early 19th century, as well as a hotspot for urban explorers. Now, as you would expect, there are a ton of legends surrounding this creepy burial site, so I'll be listing off a handful. Let's start with the ghost of Philbert Espard. During the French Revolution, Philbert was a doorman at the Val de Grace Hotel. During a mission to fetch a liqueur from a cellar, Philbert wound up in the Paris catacombs instead, walking around in the darkness alone with just a single candle. He became lost and confused. His body was not found until 11 years later when a group of cataphiles uncovered it. His body is now buried in the catacombs in the exact spot that he was found. Legend now states that on each November 3rd, Philbert's ghost haunts the labyrinth of the catacombs. However, the most disturbing story hails from the 1990s when a group of cataphiles were walking through the catacombs and discovered a video camera on the ground. To their surprise, the camera held footage on it. While watching the footage, it became apparent that the man filming was lost and had no idea how to escape the winding tunnels. The video then ends abruptly with the man dropping the camera on the ground and running off into the unknown. He was never discovered. However, it was this legend that many believe As Above, So Below, the movie, was based off of. Coming in at number 2, La Llorona. La Llorona, also known as the Weeping Woman or the Crier, is one of the most famous legends not just in Spanish culture but across the world. This lore states that a woman was abandoned by her husband and was left alone to raise her 2 children. The woman was devastated, so she drowned the boys in a river out of grief and rage. As a result, the woman was condemned to wander for all eternity until she finds the bodies of her children, often causing death and misfortune to those near her. Now, according to the legend, in a rural village lived a young woman named Maria. She came from a poor family but was known around her village for her beauty. One day a wealthy nobleman came to the village, who stopped in his tracks when he saw Maria. He proposed to her and she immediately accepted. The two wed and had 2 sons together. However, the husband was always travelling, and when he came home he only paid attention to the children. And as time passed, Maria could tell he was falling out of love with her. She was right, because one day he returned to the village with a younger woman and bid his children farewell. Now this is when Maria drowned her 2 children in blind rage. However, once she realised what she had done, she searched the river for them, but they had already been swept away. Days later, she was found dead on the riverbed, having committed the 2 ultimate sins, murder and suicide. Her spirit now haunts the land of the living and the dead, weeping for her children, earning the name La Llorona. She kidnaps wandering children at night, mistaking them for her own, while begging the heavens for forgiveness, while drowning the children she kidnaps. Folks who have claimed to have seen her say she appears at night by rivers or lakes wearing a white or black gown with a veil, and others say that if you hear the cries of La Llorona, you are marked for death. Spooky. There was also a film, I watched it recently. It was utter trash, so hopefully the legend's creepier. Finally coming in at number 1, El Coco. The Coco, also known as the Cuco, Coca, or Cuca, is a mythical ghost monster equivalent to the boogeyman found in Hispanophone and Lusophone countries. In Spain, Portugal, and Latin America, the legend goes that parents will often invoke the Coco, or Cuca, as a way of discouraging their children from misbehaving. They sing them lullabies or tell frightening rhymes which warn their children of El Coco. If they misbehave or don't obey, El Coco will come and get them, and then eat them. Classic. El Coco is a child eater and a kidnapper. It may devour the child immediately and leave no trace, or it may take the child away to a place of no return. However, it only does that to disobedient children. El Coco is known to lurk on rooftops, on the lookout for misbehaving children. It takes the shape of dark shadows and represents the opposite of a guardian angel, with the El Coco frequently compared to the devil. Now, one of the oldest known rhymes about the Coco originated from the 17th century and went like this, I quote, "Sleep child, sleep now, else Coco comes and will eat you." I mean, Straight to the point, really. I respect that. Now, you could easily draw comparisons between El Coco and the Boogeyman. However, unlike the Boogeyman, Latino parents use Coco to drive the fear of God into their children. Now, another legend has it that El Coco is Francisco Ortega. At the beginning of the 20th century, Ortega was so desperate to find a cure for his tuberculosis that he visited a curandera. He was told to drink the blood of children, so he kidnapped a 7-year-old boy named Bernardo. However, I have my doubts about this, considering the original Coco rhyme predates the Ortega legend. What do you guys think though?
Number 5. Build a UFO. In the 1989 interview that started these leaks, the claim sounded like Hollywood sci-fi. Months later though, when his identity was revealed, Bob said he worked at a secret facility that I'll talk more about later, where alien technology was being reverse engineered, meaning, taken apart to figure out how it worked and whether the Pentagon could duplicate it. Look, the premise seems a lot less absurd now. Bob said that his job was to help with the reverse engineering of one of 9 flying saucers, which he alleged were extraterrestrial in origin. He claims that one of the flying saucers, the one he coined the Sport model, was manufactured out of a metallic substance similar in appearance and touch to liquid titanium. Bob said that the propulsion of the studied vehicle ran on an antimatter reactor and was fueled by the chemical element with atomic number 115, which once again, I'll touch on later, I promise. In a subsequent interview that November, Bob appeared unmasked and under his own name, where he claimed that his job interview for work at the facility was with contractor EG&G and that his employer was the United States Navy. Bob said the craft he was working on was dismantled, and the reactor he studied was topped by a sphere or semi-sphere which emitted a force field capable of repulsing human flesh. He further explained that the craft was split into 2 main levels. So the reactor was positioned at the center of the upper level, with an antenna extending to the top, surrounded by 3 gravity amplifiers. These were connected to gravity emitters on the lower level, which can rotate 180 degrees to output a gravity beam or anti-gravity wave. In 1989, Bob said the seeds of the saucer he saw were approximately tiny human-sized, and that he had seen alien cadavers of a corresponding size. He's mentioned that the main craft he worked on would aim its belly to the target, and then bring all of the amplifiers to power and fly off in that direction, with the belly or bottom forward. If that description of a spacecraft tilting sounds familiar, I'm assuming you're familiar with the gimbal UFO? So the Pentagon released the video back in 2017, where naval pilots encountered a fleet of the unknown craft off of the coast of Florida in 2015, and have since had dozens of similar encounters. So in that specific video, there's a mechanistic turn against the wind without deceleration, which means a craft without rotors, heat signatures, tail fins, and no tail number, and it was moving in a way that is counterintuitive to aeronautics. So when Bob saw that video, he said it had to be a gravity-propelled craft, which mimics the propulsion system that he described. So okay, if you don't believe me on that one, how about we look at another now famous UFO incident, the 2004 Tic Tac encounter. I've talked about this many times. So the Navy pilot who engaged the Tic Tac, Black Aces commander Dave Fravor, says he doesn't believe the astonishing craft was made on Earth and that the propulsion might be anti-gravity. So when Bob was shown the Tic Tac video for the first time, it immediately reminded him of the Sport mode, which, like I said, that was his name for the craft stashed in the desert. And he says it's the exact same propulsion system. Former Pentagon intelligence officer Lou Elizondo was in charge of ATIP, the secret Pentagon study. He told the I-Team one goal of the project was to determine the physics of UFOs, how they can achieve the seemingly impossible. The military came to believe that the craft relied on special metamaterials, stuff that can't be made with known technology. And hey, Bob made similar claims decades ago and was ridiculed. So what do you know? Now the Pentagon's on the same page all of a sudden. Number 4, what is Area 51? So sure, today everybody knows that Area 51 is the common name of a highly classified United States Air Force facility within the Nevada Test and Training Range. As a remote detachment administered by Edwards Air Force Base, the facility is officially called Homey Airport or Groom Lake, depending on who you ask. Okay, I feel like I'm forgetting something. Don't tell me. I'm sure it'll come to me eventually. Oh, I got it. It's home to all things unknown, and lots of alien and UFO believers, such as myself, are pretty sure that that's where all the flying discs and more tend to be housed. It's commonly thought to support the development and testing of experimental aircraft and weapons systems. Now, it has never been declared a secret base, but all research and occurrences in Area 51 are top secret or sensitive compartmented information. So make of that what you will. The CIA only publicly acknowledged the base's existence on June 25th of 2013, following a Freedom of Information Act request filed in 2005 and declassified documents detailing its history and purpose. So how does Bob play into all this? Well, we're gonna go back to 1989 when he appeared in that interview with investigative reporter George Knapp on Las Vegas TV station Klaus under the pseudonym Dennis and with his face hidden to discuss his employment at S4, a subsidiary facility he claimed exists near the Nellis Air Force Base installation known as Area 51. And once again, this was back in 1989, before Area 51 was the common knowledge it is today. He claimed that said facility was adjacent to Papoose Lake, which is located south of the main Area 51 facility at Groom Lake. He claimed the site consisted of concealed aircraft hangars built into a mountainside. He said that while walking down a hallway at S4 once, he briefly glanced through a door window and saw what he interpreted as two men in lab coats facing down and talking to something with long arms. Now, he doesn't think he saw an actual alien, but speculated that he saw a doll used as a reference for the size of the alleged aliens. So everything I'm discussing today about Bob probably took place at that mysterious place out in the desert. Area 51 is also believed to house material recovered at Roswell, the study of their occupants, and the manufacturing of aircraft based on alien technology. And also might be a place to host meetings or joint undertakings with extraterrestrials. It tends to be where the development of exotic energy weapons for the Strategic Defense Initiative or other weapons programs happens, possibly where they're working on projects to do with weather control, time travel and teleportation technology, and exotic propulsion systems related to the Aurora program. So many of these tend to do with, underground facilities at Groom or Papoose Lake. So, the S4 location first talked about by Bob, which is 8.5 miles south and includes claims of a transcontinental underground railroad system and a disappearing airstrip named the Cheshire Airstrip, after Lewis Carroll's Cheshire Cat, which briefly appears when water is sprayed onto its camouflaged asphalt, and engineering based on alien technology.
Coming in at number 2, we have The Phantom of the Opera. We're all familiar with the 1986 musical based on the book by Gaston Leroux, with music by Andrew Lloyd Webber. Its central plot revolves around a beautiful soprano, Christine Daae, who becomes the obsession of a mysterious, disfigured musical genius living in the subterranean labyrinth beneath the Paris Opera House. But did you know this story is actually based on legend, with many Parisians being all too familiar with the story of the Phantom and the mysterious box number 5 at the Garnier Opera House. This legend began at the Music Conservatory on Rue Les Pelletiers, where it is said that a young pianist and a young ballerina fell in love. Planning to be wed, the pianist composed a piece of music to symbolize their love that was intended to be played at their wedding. However, that never happened because on October 28, 1873, a fire destroyed the conservatory and killed many, including the ballerina. The pianist survived but was forever scarred by the fires, particularly on his face. He abandoned the world and took refuge in the underground passage of the Garnier Opera House in order to escape the dreadful people who considered him a monster or a demon. He stayed there for the rest of his life, devoting himself to his music. Now, the pianist was never disturbed, but rumors quickly began to spiral, creating the legend of the Phantom of the Opera. The first rumors came from the opera house staff, such as stagehands and dancers. And it is also purported that box number 5 at the Garnier Opera House is said to be haunted by the mysterious Phantom and should always be left vacant for him. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have the Notre Dame and the Devil's Door. Notre Dame is one of the most infamous places in French history, with it being a medieval Catholic cathedral that was consecrated to the Virgin Mary and is considered to be one of the finest examples of French Gothic architecture. However, popular interest in the cathedral blossomed after the publication of Victor Hugo's novel The Hunchback of Notre Dame back in 1831. The cathedral is holy ground, but saying that how many tourists from around the world have been ushered in by Satan himself. Some history first though. When it comes to the construction of buildings such as this one, construction always starts at the back of the building, with the entrances added last. So when it came time to add the famous door to the cathedral, a man by the name of Mr. Biscornet, a young metalsmith, convinced the church to hire him. The job lasted months, with Biscornet slaving away in his workshop. However, when he finally finished, it was of course a masterpiece and blew the minds of Parisians. However, were the doors perhaps too good to be true? This all took place during the 1300s, when magic was believed and myths spread fast. So when people saw the door for the first time, they believed that Biscornet couldn't possibly have crafted it himself, and that instead he had sold his soul to the devil in exchange for the masterpiece. Stories quickly began to emerge of people claiming to have visited Biscornet during the creation and found him unconscious on the floor, with the project mysteriously completed. The rumors began to spread, with priests adding fuel to the fire by claiming that the door's locks refused to work until they were sprinkled with holy water. To top things off, not long after this, the artist died, with many speculating that in order to fulfill the contract, the devil had to claim Biscornet's soul. 5. La Ciguapa. This is a mythological creature that is commonly described as having human female form with brown or dark blue skin, backward facing feet, and very long, smooth hair that covers the body. According to folklore, it is a hypnotic creature that lurks in the Highland Mountains and deep forests of the island, waiting for the perfect moment to lure men into the woods and make them disappear. Classic. Some people believe that the Siguapa bring death, and it is said you should not look them in the eye, otherwise you will be at risk of becoming permanently bewitched. They are considered to be magical beings, beautiful in appearance to some but horrendous to others. They are deceitful and hell-bent on capturing a wayward traveler. Now some legends suggest that not all are evil and do not wish to kill, though much evidence supports the benevolent claim. Law states that the only way to truly capture a Siguapa is by tracking them at night during a full moon, with a black and white polydactylic dog. The Siguapa also has a similar one-legged version from Colombia, called La Patasolo, who shapeshifts into a skull horse head. Lovely. In at 4, El Sombreron. El Sombreron is a famous legend told in books and film, and is also a boogeyman figure throughout Spanish culture. The figure is known by other names like Cipitio, the Goblin, and Sizimite. However, his characteristics are always the same: a short man with a black dress, a thick belt, a large black hat, and boots that make a lot of noise when he walks. He is said to ride horses and braid their tails in manes. So sweet, I think. When he cannot find a horse, he will hunt down a dog to braid instead. Now the legend goes that in the neighborhood of La Recolosi lived a woman named Susanna, the daughter of a woman who owned a store. She was known to be pretty with long hair and blue hazelnut eyes. One night when there was a full moon, she was on her balcony admiring the sky when suddenly a short man appeared wearing a big hat and holding a guitar. The girl's beauty had amazed him. He sang her a song, however her parents quickly made her come inside. Since that day she had not been able to sleep because she still hears the man with the guitar. She has not been able to eat because when her food is served it is contaminated with soil. Her worried parents took the young girl to a priest in order to rid her of the entity. A few days later, El Sombreron disappeared for good. In at 3, Duende. Duende is a creature from Spanish folklore that has been conceptualized as a mischievous spirit inhabiting a house, often living inside the bedroom walls of young children. They are even known to clip the toenails of unkempt children, often leading to the mistaken removal of an entire toe. Yeah. No fun at all. Now, beliefs about duendes vary from region to region, but some say that they are the souls of infants who died before they could be baptized, whereas others simply portray them as naughty spirits that hide in a person's home and wreak havoc. Duendes became so legendary in Spain that in the 16th century there was even a law that said that anyone who moved into a home only to later realize it was infested with duendes were free to abandon it. Yeah. That's intense. No matter what, most stories about the duende seem to have a special relationship to children, most likely because parents used them as a tactic to scare their kids into doing things. Otherwise the duendes were coming to kidnap them or even eat them if you don't clean your room, eat your dinner, bathe, etc.
Number 3, contact with Zeta Reticuli. So Bob has claimed that during his, joining the program, he read briefing documents describing the historical involvement of Earth for the past 10,000 years with extraterrestrial beings described as gray aliens from a planet orbiting the twin binary system Zeta Reticuli. As of September 2019, no extrasolar planets have been found in the system, according to government experts, but we all know that they can lie to us about that. So for the uninitiated, what the heck is Zeta Reticuli? So this is a wide binary star system in the southern constellation of Reticulum. From the southern hemisphere, the pair can be seen with the regular eye as a double star in very dark skies. Based on parallax measurements, this system is located at a distance of about 39.3 light years from Earth. Both stars are solar analogs that have characteristics similar to those of the Sun. They belong to the Zeta Herculis moving group of stars that share a common origin. So you might be asking, okay Alexa, what does this have to do with aliens? So does anybody remember Skinny Bob? If not, I'll refresh your memory. So a very curious video showed up on YouTube in 2011, showing a collection of leaked videos where you can see an alien being interrogated by some sort of government agency of sorts. It's a typical gray type entity shown being interviewed and examined, supposedly as part of some sort of diplomatic exchange, and here's the moment you've been waiting for. He says he's from the Zeta Reticuli star system, sent as part of an envoy to discuss matters of mutual concern. According to the videos, the aliens would be escorted by special officers and only meet with high-ranking officials. Although several aliens are claimed to have been present, the one most prominently featured was given the nickname Skinny Bob. The alien appears as a very thin, slouched over figure with an oversized bald head, slit-like mouth, large eyes that seem expressive and blink, and claw-like hands. Now there was apparently a whole series of interviews conducted with the creature between 1942 and 69, although only a few clips have managed to get leaked out. The most well-known clip simply shows Skinny Bob sitting at a table, apparently in a telepathic interview, after which we see footage of the alien from head to toe, showing its disproportionately long arms and overall build. After that, there is a shot of it within a pool of some sort of liquid where it was supposedly asleep. Now, according to the videos, the aliens were often filmed without their knowledge or agreement, with document 072-E supposedly describing an incident in 1961 where 3 of the beings realized they were being secretly filmed by a hidden device, which was considered a violation of their agreement. There was a treaty that stipulated that photographs and filming of the entities would not be allowed unless specific permission was given. The diplomatic exchange of it all matches up with what we know about Area 51 being a place for secret meetings and more. Number 2, Men in Black erasing history. So yeah, it's no secret the government has the power to erase or cover up whatever they want. And what they've done to Bob in an attempt to discredit him is a very clear example of that control. So Bob is adamant that his employment and education records have been erased and modified. So remember how I mentioned that he's a physicist? So Bob claims to have obtained master's degrees in physics from MIT and in electronics from Caltech, but mysteriously, both universities show no record of him. Now I get one institution losing records can be explained, as like a clerical error, but both losing records are a little suspicious. Earlier, I also mentioned how Bob claimed that his job interview for work at the facility was with contractor EG&G, and that his employer was the United States Navy, right? Well, EG&G stated it had no records on him, and his employment at a Nellis Air Force Base subsidiary has also been discredited by skeptics, as well as the United States Air Force. Once again, discredited or simply just erased by the government. Bob claims to have worked as a physicist during his tenure at the Los Alamos Meson Physics facility, but an inquiry into his position revealed his role to have been a technician for a contractor firm, and that he worked neither as a physicist or for Los Alamos. Not to sound like a broken record, but it's clearly the Men in Black at work here, and skeptics just need to understand that. Number 1, Element 115. Alrighty, the moment we've all been waiting for. What the heck is Element 115 and what does it do? So Bob has claimed that the propulsion of the studied vehicle that he reverse engineered ran on an antimatter reactor and was fueled by the chemical element with atomic number 115, which at the time was provisionally named unempentium and had not yet been artificially created. It was first synthesized in 2003 and later named moscovium. He said that the propulsion system relied on a stable isotope of E115, which allegedly generates a gravity wave that allowed the vehicle to fly and to evade visual detection by bending light around it. Now, no stable isotopes of moscovium have yet been synthesized. All have proven extremely radioactive, decaying in a few hundred milliseconds. In 2017, Bob's workplace was raided by the FBI and local police, which he theorizes was to recover element 115, a substance he said he kind of kept from the government lab. I don't blame him.
5. Huldra, also known as Hulda. These are seductive forest creatures found in Scandinavian folklore. Huldra derives from a root meaning covered or secret and is often depicted as just one individual. However, through folklore it is changed to an entire Hulda race and not just one single entity. Hulda is described as being a troll-like woman living in the woods and is known to be fair and beautiful, but wild, and is known to have long hair which she hides behind her back upon meeting a human. This legend goes that Adam and Eve had a handful of children, and one day when Eve was giving her children a bath, God came to visit her. However, Eve had not yet bathed all her children, so she hid the ones that were dirty. God asked her, "Are there not more children?" Eve said no. So God responded, "Then let all that is hidden remain hidden." And thus the ones hidden became the underjuriski. Excuse my pronunciation, please. Which means the ones living underground. The hidden children became lost souls under the surface of the earth, calling for someone to be with them, usually human passerbys. Huldra was one of these children, yet somehow managed to remain on the surface of the earth. Be warned, she is neither good nor evil and cannot be trusted. Coming in at 4, Jotni, also known as Jotun or Jotnar. This legend is described as being a type of entity contrasted with gods and other figures such as dwarfs and elves. In Norse mythology, Jotni appears as a giant being, often ugly and lumpy, with many of them in possession of great knowledge. Oftentimes the Jotni is described as riding on a wolf with vipers as reins and is believed to be depicted in this 10th century picture stone from the Hunnestad monument. As I previously stated, most Jotni possess great wisdom. For example, Vavtrudni, I don't know how to pronounce it, who was clad with the very same knowledge as Odin. Legend goes that the Jotni are Thor's most dangerous opponent and is a major motif in Norse mythology, with the Jotni residing in the great mountain area of southern Norway. Now throughout history the folklore has become blurred, with some stories blending Jotni and trolls together into one, but that is simply not the case, with these two legends having very separate histories throughout folklore. And that's the tea. Coming at 3, Fossagrimmen. Simply known as Grim, this is a water spirit or troll in Scandinavian folklore. This water spirit plays the fiddle and is described as being exceptionally talented with the sounds of forest, wind and water playing over his fiddle strings. He is a young handsome man who sits naked under waterfalls. What's not to love? Playing mostly the music of nature. Grim is said to be willing to teach his fiddle skills in exchange for a food offering made on a Thursday evening, and in secrecy. The offerings he accepts is a white goat thrown with head turned away into a waterfall that flows northwards, smoked mutton stolen from the neighbour's storage 4 Thursdays in a row. However, if there's not enough meat on the bone, he will only teach those seeking the skill how to tune the fiddle. What a dick. However, if the offering is satisfactory, he'll take the student's right hand and draw the fingers along the strings until they all bleed. But after that time, the student will be able to play so well that, I quote, "the trees shall dance and torrents in their falls stand still." It is rumoured that Torgeir Orgensen, better known as Millergutten, was a famous fiddle player from Telemark, Norway, who was so good at the fiddle that he was believed to have sold his soul in exchange for Grimm's skills.
In our number 3 spot today, we have the Lubbock Incident. On August 25th, 1951, in Lubbock, Texas, a group of scientists from the Texas Technical College were all hanging out in the backyard of geology professor Dr. W.I. Robinson. They were all just chilling, enjoying each other's company, until around 9:20 p.m. when they saw something very strange. It was a V-shaped formation of 15 to 30 bluish-green lights passing overhead. They were completely confused over what it could be, but figured that the lights would likely reappear, which they did. About an hour later, the lights reappeared, and at this point, all of these scientists knew that they had witnessed something exceptionally interesting, but what was it? The scientists weren't the only ones to witness the lights either. About 350 miles away in Albuquerque, New Mexico, an employee of the Atomic Energy Commission's top secret Sandia Corporation, who had a high-level Q security clearance, had been sitting outside with his wife, quote, gazing at the night sky, commenting on how beautiful it was, when both of them were startled at the sight of a huge airplane flying swiftly and silently over their home. On the aft edge of the wings, there were 6 to 8 pairs of soft, glowing bluish lights. There were more sightings as well, all reporting a similar thing. The group of scientists began investigating, tracking the lights, which they witnessed 12 more times. They measured the angle of the lights, they tracked the speed, and they attempted, unsuccessfully, to try and measure the UFO's altitude. Here's the deal with this though. The government did end up investigating, but the official explanation for these lights is the most cryptic message I've ever seen. It read, quote, "I thought that the professor's lights might have been some kind of birds reflecting the light from mercury vapor streetlights, but I was wrong. They weren't birds. They weren't refracted light. But they weren't spaceships. The lights that the professor saw have been positively identified as a very commonplace and easily explainable natural phenomena. I can't divulge exactly the way the answer was found because it is an interesting story of how a scientist set up complete instrumentation to track down the lights. Telling the story would lead to his identity, and in exchange for his story, I promised the man complete anonymity. Despite people claiming that the mystery has been solved, by this explanation, people are left with a lot more questions than answers. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Shag Harbor Incident. This UFO encounter is often referred to as Canada's Roswell, so I was shocked that I hadn't heard of it before. Basically, this incident took place on October 4th, 1967, when an unknown object crashed into the water near Shag Harbor, which is a tiny town in Nova Scotia. There were at least 11 people who witnessed this object as it crashed, and many people claimed to have heard a whistling sound followed by a loud bang when the crash took place. The witnesses that claimed to have seen the UFO were all doing a bunch of different things at the time. One couple was just sitting on their porch, but the 2 witnesses that really get me are a flight pilot and a ship captain. On Air Canada Flight 305, First Officer Robert Ralph pointed out to Captain Pierre Charbonneau that there was something strange at the left side of the aircraft. They reported an object tracking along on a parallel course a few miles away and described it as a brilliantly lit rectangular object with a string of smaller lights trailing the object. Shortly after they first noticed it, there was a large but silent explosion near the unknown object, and then 2 minutes later there was a second explosion, but this one faded to a blue cloud. As for the ship ship captain, Captain Leo Howard Mercy, he saw 4 blips on his Decca radar that were totally stationary. This led to him looking up to the sky, and that is when he saw 4 bright objects sitting in a rectangular formation about 28 kilometers from the vessel's window. He wasn't the only one who saw it on board. The entire crew of nearly 20 fishermen stood on deck and watched. A man named Laurie Wickens was another one of the witnesses, and he and some of his friends ended up calling the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, because they saw a huge object floating in the Atlantic Ocean about 1,000 feet off of the shore. This is all super weird, and not only the RCMP, but also the Royal Canadian Navy and the Royal Canadian Air Force became involved in investigation, but nothing was ever recovered or found. But it was also revealed that all commercial, private, and military aircrafts along the eastern seaboard were accounted for. So what could have all these witnesses seen? Since they have never officially identified what it was in the official Government of Canada documents, it is listed as a UFO. And finally, in our number 1 spot today, we have the Westall incident. Taking it back to 1966, we have the largest mass UFO sighting in Australia that at the time was largely ignored. This incident took place when over 300 students and staff members of a school in Melbourne all witnessed multiple UFOs silently flying through the air before they landed in a nearby field. Well, there's been a ton of speculation about this incident in the many years it's been. One witness account stands out among the rest, and that is the account made by the science teacher from the school, Andrew Greenwood. He was alerted to the UFO event by a hysterical student, and when he went outside to see for himself, everything changed. Previously a skeptic of UFO stories, Andrew's mind was abruptly changed when he saw, as he described it, a round silver object about the size of a car with a metal rod sticking up in the air. He went on to explain that suddenly 5 planes came and surrounded the object, all while more people were gathering to watch. He called what happened next the most amazing flying he has ever seen, explaining that, quote, every time they got too close to the object it would slowly accelerate, then rapidly accelerate, and then move away from them and stop. Then they would take off after it again, and the same thing would happen. This went on for about 20 minutes before the mysterious object just vanished. As weird as this all was, what was almost weirder was what happened next. Firstly, the headmaster of the school is said to have tried to put a stop to anyone talking about the incident at all, threatening severe punishment to any student or staff who was caught speaking about it, and when the Royal Australian Air Force contacted him, he refused to talk to them at all about it. There have also been stories of witnesses getting visits from people warning them not to speak of the incident. Andrew explained, quote, when he asked the physical education teacher to describe what she had seen herself so that he could compare it with his own observation, she just wouldn't say anything. Another witness who did talk to Andrew and described what she had seen in great detail, just 30 minutes later refused to speak to him and wouldn't say a word. Was this because of the threats from the headmaster, or was something else going on here? This is definitely one strange UFO story that leaves behind a lot of questions.
5. Hypnotic regression. Many people who claim to have been abducted by aliens are unable to remember a lot of the specific details of their abductions. Because of this and the public stigma against people with alien experiences, many people choose to never come forward, or their stories are written off as delusion. But in the spirit of giving people the benefit of the doubt, let's talk about a certain woman's experience with hypnotic regression. A woman who claims she was abducted by aliens was put under hypnosis in order to give a documentary crew information about the visitors from other worlds. When asked how aliens are able to travel at such incredible speeds, she responded with the following: I can't explain it, but it's like if they want to get from one point to another point, they remove what's in between, so they don't have to travel that distance. They are instantly from there to there. When asked why aliens are studying humans, the response was, they are very wary of humankind. Mankind is progressing technology-wise, and soon he's going to come across technology that will allow him to peel back the layers of dimensions. And they want to know all about man for their own benefit. Man's warlike, aggressive, an animal. He's in possession of technology that is more than he is. There's no balance. And they're very wary that he's now on the threshold of many breakthroughs, one of which is peeling back dimensions. It's like an onion skin. You peel back one layer, and there's another one underneath, and another one underneath, and another one underneath. The same with dimensions. They're scared. Do aliens really study humanity out of a fear of what we will do once we discover interdimensional travel? And if so, how do they feel about all the UFOs we have apparently shot down? What do species historically do with groups that they are afraid of? What fate awaits the human race at the hands of these interplanetary visitors? Number 4. Sam the Sandown Clown. Our next story comes from the January-February edition of the British UFO Research Association Journal and concerns an anonymous man going by the alias of Mr. Y, who claims that one October night in the year 1970, he was driving to visit a friend when he saw something hovering over the swamp to his right. It was a huge UFO with several different multicolored orb-like lights brightly illuminating the craft. He got out of his vehicle to observe the craft for a moment and then continued on his way. He looked out his window and realized that the craft was now following him, its lights spinning. Mr. Y got to his friend's house, and the friend was amazed at the guests that had followed him there, before disappearing into a nearby tree line. For years, Mr. Y would see the red orbs following him from time to time, watching him and stalking him. Doubting that anyone would believe him, he kept these encounters to himself until 1973, when his 7-year-old daughter Faye and her friend were playing near Lake Common Road when they heard an eerie wailing sound. They followed the sound to a nearby meadow, and the wailing stopped. They walked over a small bridge when suddenly a blue-gloved hand with 3 fingers appeared from under the bridge. They looked in the small river and saw a strange figure standing in the middle holding a book. He was described as being 7 feet tall and without a neck. He was wearing an odd and tattered costume consisting of a green tunic with a red collar, white pants, and a pointed hat with a black ball on top and 2 antennae. He had a pale white face, lips that never moved, red hair, and triangle holes for eyes. The children watched in shock as the figure hobbled over to a strange metal hut. Not long after, they saw the figure again as he wailed, and then spoke into a microphone asking if they were still there. He then communicated by writing in his book, saying that his name was Sam. They asked if he was a man, and he said no. They asked if he was a ghost, and he said, well, not really, but in a way I am. He said that there were others like him, and that he was afraid of being attacked by humans. He invited them into his metal hut, which was filled with wooden furniture and elaborate knobs. The children hung out with Sam for an hour before leaving, and a year later, she told her father about the encounter, telling him that there had been men nearby fixing a post who had acted as though they could not see the strange creature. He had trouble believing her, but he had had enough experiences with aliens of his own that he had to consider the possibility that it was real. Did Mr. Y's daughter really see a strange alien in the woods, or is this just the overactive imagination of a child? In an age where spacecraft are being seen all over the world at an alarming rate, we really can't rule anything out. And what of the UFO stalking Mr. Y? What were they hoping to see? And why was he selected to be the subject of their curiosity? This mystery will likely never be fully unraveled. Number 3. Aliens take a baby. Our next entry comes courtesy of phantomsandmonsters.com and describes a 14-year-old visiting the home of some seniors and seeing something more terrifying than they could possibly imagine. As they themselves told it, I witnessed an alien abduction back in 2002 when I was 14. A friend of mine wanted me to help her grandparents set up their computer. I said sure and rode my bicycle to their house. I got there and clouds appeared, so I decided to make this a pretty quick visit. I set up the computer and installed some software for them, showing them all how it works and such. They go back and sit on the couch while I get my backpack to get ready to leave, as their other granddaughter, who is about 6 years old, was sleeping in the other room. All of a sudden, a cold breeze went through the room. It was odd, as all the doors and windows were shut. The grandparents looked towards the kitchen, and what I saw made me freeze in place. There were 3 creatures standing in the kitchen. 2 of them were short, gray alien creatures, with thicker necks than usually described, with the eyes closer to the sides of their heads. They wore silver jumpsuits. In between them was a taller creature that looked like a humanoid mantis, wearing a black robe with a yellow stripe going down the middle. They walked to another room, and a minute later returned with the robed creature, carrying the granddaughter in its arms. It's looking at me, and I get the feeling it knows who I am. I don't know why I got the feeling, but I did. I was very scared. The grandparents were looking at them too, but not doing anything. I thought, screw this, and fought off all the fear I could and clumsily charged towards them. I didn't even make 3 steps before the grandfather stopped me and told me they will bring her back. The creatures didn't move and continued to look at me. I couldn't get any more words out of my throat because I didn't even know what to think at this point. All of a sudden, a light stretched around them and they vanished. An odd glow remained for a few seconds before fading. After a minute of awkward silence and the grandfather repeating, "She will be brought back," soon I decided to leave. I rode my bicycle home as fast as I could while looking back, hoping that nothing was following me. I didn't sleep that night after I got home. The next day, I told my friend what had happened, and she told me it has happened before. The grandparents and other family members have tried to stop it, but to no avail. They just accepted it with a look of defeat and moved on. The granddaughter was brought back after a few hours. Not long after I witnessed this incident, their whole family moved elsewhere. I've heard from other people who claimed to experience similar events, and I feel they are legit. Why are aliens taking babies away from their families? What are they hoping to learn? And is there some way to stop them? One can hope, but it seems unlikely.
Number 2, the Navy and their pilots, Navy pilots. In September 2019, Navy spokesperson Joe Gradisher spoke out on 3 recently released videos by the Army that contained evidence of unexplained aerial phenomena. The Navy agreed that just this once, they would be willing to talk about something weird they'd seen and recorded because pilots are reportedly encountering bizarre things every day and feel just too uncomfortable to report it. One pilot in particular, Ryan Graves, who's a 10-year vet, has said he believes he's seen thousands of unexplained phenomena in the air in his career, but these go unreported because of the stigma attached to the previous theories about what may or may not be in the videos, in his words. To translate that a bit in layman's terms, the Navy feels that they have to comment so that pilots are willing to talk about that, hey, maybe we're seeing UFOs without feeling too crazy. These videos in question were released from 2017 to 2018, and they feature long, oblong-shaped objects captured with infrared that disappear in the Earth's atmosphere. Hey, there it is again, more cylindrical-shaped UFOs. Now, I'll be clear, I don't really have much of a connection or through line here, but I do think it's very fascinating how many of these stories do mention these cylindrical-shaped objects. Far from the earliest or last, in 2004 and in 2015, 2 similar sightings were reported featuring similar vehicles. Now, the purpose of investigating most of these reports is more focused on safety hazards and threats of national security. And at the same time, maybe they're not openly admitting they've got UFOs flying around, but they're getting pretty darn close. The 2004 sighting, I think, is a particularly fascinating one. 2 pilots, one Commander Fravor and one Lieutenant Commander Slate, called it in, reporting that they saw objects out of nowhere at some 80,000 feet in the air, and then descending rapidly towards the Pacific Ocean, stopping at around 20,000 feet and hovering in place. They would drop out of radar range or shoot directly up in the sky on a 90-degree angle. You know, normal things aircrafts love to do. They weren't American crafts, and they weren't recognized by any organizations they'd ever seen. Maybe it's tech not of this world. Number 1, government councils. You know, the era we're in right now is probably one of the most fascinating times to be invested in UFOs and unexplained alien sightings, so consider yourself lucky. Because it seems like we are getting dangerously close to a government finally confessing it. It feels like we're weeks away some days, you know? The UAP report was a seminal turning point when the Pentagon outright admitted they had thousands of documents and reports and investigations into the possibility of life somewhere out there in the Milky Way. Over the years, there have been a few investigations into unexplained aerial phenomena, but they're usually pretty hush-hush clandestine. Project Blue Book is probably the most famous secret project among them, but that was, you know, a secret. Well, in the interest of transparency, as of October 2022, NASA is coming clean, washing their hands, and opening a new study into the research of extraterrestrial life. 16 hand-picked scientists and specialists have been selected to analyze data and determine how best to go forward when observing events. And they're not really looking at past cases, they're more looking towards future things. And this project will include researchers, personnel from all divisions, including former astronaut Scott Kelly, who served as the pilot for the Discovery shuttle and also held the world record for most days in space. So I guess he probably knows 1 or 2 things about space, maybe, and I'm sure he's seen something weird. Kelly himself doesn't personally believe in aliens, saying, "I think there's probably intelligent life in the universe, but I don't think they visit planet Earth." Why not? We got lots of great stuff out here. We got water slides, we got Vin Diesel. No other planet has those 2 things, and I'm sure we got a couple other great things from the human experience, so aliens, come on down when you're ready. We'll welcome you with open arms, and If those were UFOs you sent, we're really sorry that we shot those down. I didn't have anything to do with that.
Listed in our number 5 spot, we have Project Grudge Report 13. Okay, so I've read quite a few different UFO sighting stories and stories of alleged alien abductions, and this is fully one of the most terrifying that I have ever heard of. So basically, the story starts off in March of 1956 when Air Force Sergeant Jonathan P. Lovett was assisting Major William Cunningham in the White Sands Missile Testing Grounds near Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico. The pair were out searching for debris from a recent rocket test when Major Cunningham heard a loud scream. His first thought was that Sergeant Lovett had been bitten by a snake, so he went around to help aid his partner when he allegedly saw something he never expected. He recounted seeing the sergeant being dragged away by some sort of long serpentine arm that had wrapped around his legs. Whatever this creature was, it was connected to a hovering silver disc that was in the air about 15 feet away. The major stood there in horror as he watched this creature and the sergeant retreat into the craft, which then rose vertically into the sky. Of course, he radioed for help, and while he was taken to the hospital for observation, search teams were sent out immediately. It wouldn't happen until 3 days later that they would find the body of Sergeant Lovett, only 10 miles from the site where he was said to have disappeared from. The autopsy performed on him later also only raised more questions than answers, as his body was severely harmed. So of course there was an investigation that happened, and many people claim this investigation was detailed in a 600-page document labeled Project Grudge Report 13. But the problem with this is that no official information on Report 13 exists, and the US government denies its very existence. Though Grudge Reports 1 through 12 have been declassified, along with Report 14, no official mention or accounting of Report 13 exists, and the story solely relies on secondhand accounts of the horrible incident. In our number 4 spot today, we have the cigar-shaped UFO. Okay, so let's set the stage. It's 2:45 a.m. on July 24th, 1948, and there are 20 passengers aboard a twin-engine propeller plane that is at 5,000 feet, being flown from Houston to Atlanta by pilot Clarence S. Childs and co-pilot John B. Whitted. Out of the 20 passengers on board, 19 of them are asleep at these early morning hours, and everything seems to be going as per usual until it wasn't. The 2 pilots and the 1 passenger who was awake all witnessed the same thing about 20 miles southeast of Montgomery, Alabama. About a week after the incident, the pilot explained what he had seen by saying, quote, "It was clear there were no wings present, that it was powered by some jet or other type of power shooting flame from the rear some 50 feet. There were 2 rows of windows which indicated an upper and a lower deck, and from inside these windows a very bright light was glowing. Underneath the ship there was a blue glow of light. By his estimates, he watched the UFO for about 10 seconds before it completely vanished." The co-pilot gave a similar explanation and also added, quote, "The object was cigar-shaped and seemed to be about 100 feet in length. The fuselage appeared to be about 3 times the circumference of a B-29 fuselage. It had 2 rows of windows, an upper and a lower. The windows were very large and seemed square. They were white with light, which seemed to be caused by some type of combustion. I asked Captain Childs what we had just seen, and he said that he didn't know." Well, this is obviously all very strange and peculiar. What has driven UFO enthusiasts even more is the fact that this strange sighting was of course later investigated by the US government, but the results of that investigation have allegedly been mostly destroyed. Does that mean that they found something they aren't willing to share yet? Some believe that perhaps the pilots and the passenger witnessed a secret Soviet spy craft, while others believe it was definitely something of the extraterrestrial variety.
Number 2. Dream or abduction. This next story is from an anonymous Reddit user who claimed to be abducted and experimented on by aliens before waking up at home with injuries related to the experiment. As he told the story, "In July of 2015, back when I was 19, I lived in a house in Southport, Sacramento with 3 other friends. I woke up one night to a light coming through the ceiling of my room, and it lifted me out of my bed. Next thing I know, I'm in some kind of chair and unable to control my body, like I was drugged with something. There were guys that were not human men, but gray people with large black almond-shaped eyes doing stuff with what seemed like medical instruments and machines. I was very terrified. I was unarmed, naked, unable to move. I was so scared. One of them was touching the machine that put the tube down my throat and into my stomach. His hand got close to my face because he had to adjust something holding my head in place. I remember getting a good look at his hand and eyes. They had long fingers with pads at the tips, sort of like salamanders, and they don't have fingernails. Their skin is gray, but kind of like a powdery translucent gray. They had large heads with small necks, so small and thin it didn't make sense. Their arms and fingers were long and skinny too. I was in the chair with my head and jaw held by something so I didn't see their feet. I'd say the tallest probably stood about the height of my lowest rib, and for reference, I'm 5'10". The tube machine sucked out the food I ate earlier that day, and then was pulled out of me. I don't remember how I got there, but then I remembered being in a cage made of some kind of metal that reminded me of aluminum. In a room with curved walls. In front of me was a man who looked a lot like a human, talking to a gray person on a window that lit up a screen like a hologram. The man was tall and looked like a human, except that his skin was very white and his hair was blonde and platinum. He spoke with a gray person on the holo screen in a language I didn't understand. He wore a blue flight uniform of some kind. This man was obviously military of some sort judging by his uniform. The gray person spoke in a language that sounded like birds chirping. Once the call was over, the holo screen turned into a different display with symbols, and the man turned and walked to me. He crouched down and spoke to me in plain English and said to me, "Everything's gonna be fine. I'm going to get you out of here and take you home." I was so happy to hear that. He opened the cage, and next thing I know, I fell on top of my bed with my back hitting the mattress first. I immediately got out of bed right after I fell. Was this a real alien abduction or simply a horrible nightmare? Typically, I would think it was merely a bad dream, but the user describes extreme pain in his throat for days afterwards from the tube being forced into him. What was the source of this pain if it was simply a dream? Truly a strange encounter to contemplate. Number 1. The Alien and the Bassinet. Our final story is another from phantomsandmonsters.com about a woman who was asleep in bed next to her baby's bassinet before waking up and seeing something that would make any mother panic. The following is an excerpt from her account. "I turned over on my side, facing the bassinet, and noticed a bright light coming in between the window blinds. I thought out loud, is it morning already? The light was coming in between the blinds and it was so bright, but the rest of the room was dark. There was also a bright light on the wall next to the window, and I looked up to see where the light was coming from. To my horror, just above the bassinet was an alien's gray face. It was just the head, no upper body, legs, or arms. The head was dark in color, very round, ending in a pointed chin, and there was a small slit for a mouth. The nostrils were small, but the eyes were large and almond-shaped and very shiny black. It had some sort of glass lamp on the top of its head. The light on the wall was projected from the lamp. Then I noticed that the being was looking down at my baby daughter. Oh my god, I couldn't speak. My heart started pounding so hard that I started trembling uncontrollably. It saw me and realized I was looking at it. The being moved towards me and I started screaming and swinging my arms. I remember that I screamed out loud for it to leave. It floated from its original position above the bassinet to just above my face. I remember seeing this light blue fog build up in front of my face, and then in a dreamlike manner, I heard a cooing sound similar to mourning doves. I had the feeling that whoever was talking to me was stern and was telling me that it was for our own good. The woman then describes waking up with a sore spot on her head and the alien being gone without a trace. She insists it was not a dream and that she really saw an alien creature that she believes will one day return. For her sake, let us hope it was simply a dream. Did these people really experience alien encounters, or were they simply mistaken, delusional, or lying?